After the crash, Ethan lost his memory. He remembered everyone, except Vivian. For days, Ryan had been keeping watch by his side. When it became clear Ethan genuinely didn't recognize the name, something in Ryan's expression shifted, tightened. "It's just the two of us here," Ryan said, lowering his voice, his gaze sharp. "Be straight with me. Is this some new reverse psychology stunt? Playing the amnesia card to get Vivian's attention?" Ethan blinked, startled. "What? No. I swear, I don't know who she is." "You're not messing with me?" "Why would I? I really don't remember her." "Who is she?" "Swear it," Ryan demanded, eyes narrowing. Without hesitation, Ethan raised his hand and swore to God. The instant he did, so calmly, so convincingly, Ryan recoiled like he'd been struck by lightning. He grabbed Ethan's shoulders and shook him hard. "You seriously forgot? You forgot Vivian? Just her?" Ethan, thoroughly confused, stared at him. "Why is that such a big deal? Who even is she?" Ryan's face twisted with something between frustration and disbelief. He rubbed his temples, then gave in with a sigh. "Vivian is. Vivian. Man, you fell head over heels for her the moment you saw her at my place. Spent 7 years chasing after her." Ethan listened, stunned, his mind blank as Ryan kept talking, spilling memories that belonged to a stranger. "So, is she my girlfriend now?" Ryan hesitated. A flicker of awkwardness passed over his face. "No. Not even close. Vivian's always been distant. Cold, even. She turned you down. Turned everyone down. She's still hung up on her first love, Adrian. Back when they broke up, she spiraled. Drank herself sick, ended up hospitalized. Damn near lost her life. And now, all these years later, she's still not over him. The night of your accident, she left you on the side of the highway in a storm just to pick him up from the airport. He was flying back from Canada. That's why you were alone when the crash happened." The words landed hard. Ethan sat in silence, his face a storm of disbelief and something deeper, hurt. "So let me get this straight," he said finally. "Vivian never cared for me. She had someone else. And not only did she reject me, she left me, abandoned me, and that's how I ended up in the accident. So, what the hell did I ever see in her? Are you sure you're not making this up?" Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "If I were lying, I'd give you a better story. But everyone knows it, Ethan, you were obsessed with her. Madly in love." He handed Ethan his phone. "Here. See for yourself." Ethan took it, skeptical, and typed in a passcode without thinking. It didn't unlock. "Your passcode isn't your old celebrity crush's birthday anymore," Ryan said, his voice quiet. "It's Vivian's. July 15th. 0715. Ethan tried it, and sure enough, the phone unlocked. The moment he opened the photo gallery, thousands of unfamiliar images flooded the screen. A woman's face stared back at him from every angle, every setting. Stunning. Arrestingly beautiful. He stared at her for a long while, silent. And then it hit him, Ryan hadn't made any of it up. Because Vivian's face was exactly his type. But the more he scrolled, the heavier the silence became. She never smiled at the camera. In fact, most of the photos weren't posed at all, clearly taken in secret. And in the few where she was looking his way, her eyes were like ice. Not anger. Not annoyance. Just absence. Like she saw right through him. Something in his chest tightened. He backed out of the gallery and opened the Notes app. Dozens of entries filled the screen. All about her. Her favorite foods. Her pet peeves. Her allergies. Her moods. her patterns. And then came the diary entries, daily dispatches from a one-sided love that had left scars deeper than he could remember. Valentine's Day number 7. I rehearsed the confession for weeks. Got every word right, just like I planned. And still, like always, she said no. She said there was no future for us. But I still can't let her go. You got drunk again tonight. Called me by his name. Over and over. Hundreds of times. You told me you can't forget him. That even knowing it's hopeless, you'd rather burn than give up. And for a second, I saw myself in you. Loving without hope. Wanting what won't love you back. Ethan had no memory of writing these words. But the pain in them? That landed hard. It was as if he could feel every word digging into him, each line pressing on nerves he didn't know still existed. His chest ached with a dull, persistent throb. His eyes burned. Something hot and bitter sat heavy in the back of his throat. He sat there, frozen, phone in hand, breath shallow, tears threatening. The hospital room was silent for a long time. Then Ryan finally spoke. So, what are you gonna do? Keep looking into it? I mean, I could call my uncle, he's a top psych specialist, but he's in London right now, so. Ethan shook his head. No. I think I'll let it go. He exhaled deeply, then glanced down at the phone again. I don't remember anything, but from what I can feel, loving her must have been hell. If forgetting is the price I paid to get out, maybe it's not a bad deal. And just like that, he lowered his head, tapped through every image, every note, every memory of her. Deleted them all. Every single one. Ryan was still staring at him, visibly stunned, just about to say something, when his phone rang. He checked the caller ID, answered briefly, then slung his bag over one shoulder and stood up abruptly. I gotta run home for something, he said, voice rushed. Take care of yourself, okay? I'll swing by again once I've dealt with it. The door clicked shut behind him with a hollow thud. Ethan was just about to lie back and rest when the landline on the bedside table rang. He picked it up. Remember what Mom mentioned? When you were little, the two families made that marriage arrangement. It's been sitting there all these years. Have you thought about what you're going to do? It was Helen. She'd already braced herself for rejection before even dialing. This call was a final, half-hearted attempt. But after a pause, Ethan gave an answer that caught even himself by surprise. Yeah, he said quietly. Once I wrap things up here, I'll come back and get married. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Helen's voice returned, breathless with disbelief. Wait, what did you just say? You're not into Vivian anymore? Ethan, you've chased her for years. You refused to come back to Seabrook just to stay in Crestwood for her. You gave up everything. What changed? Ethan hesitated. How could he explain the amnesia? The accident? The blankness where years of heartbreak should have been? He didn't want to worry them, and certainly didn't want to relive what little he'd just learned. So after a long breath, he gave the only answer he could. I don't love her anymore, he said flatly. And I never will again. After hanging up, Ethan mentally mapped out the logistics. He figured he'd need about 2 weeks to close things out on his end, so he booked a flight to Seabrook for mid-month. As soon as the ticket was confirmed, a nurse walked in to let him know it was time for a follow-up scan. He got into the wheelchair. The moment he rolled out of the room and looked up, he froze. That face. He'd just seen it. In the photo gallery. 1,000 times. Vivian. She was standing a few feet away, dressed simply, but with that same distant chill carved into her features. The second she spotted him, her expression shifted, sharpened. Her gaze turned glacial. What the hell, she snapped. How did you know I was here? Are you following me now, even to the hospital? Ethan blinked, caught completely off guard. Of all the ways he'd imagined meeting her again, this wasn't it. And her hostility, so sharp, so personal, it cut through the sterile hallway like broken glass. I think you've misunderstood, he said, slowly, carefully. I'm not following you. I was in a car accident. That's why I'm here. I've been recovering. His voice was calm. Neutral. But inside, he was shaken, not just by seeing her, but by how deeply she seemed to resent him. And he didn't even know why. Vivian gave Ethan a sharp once-over, her brows drawn in. She looked like she was about to say something, when the door to the nearby hospital room swung open. Her attention snapped away from Ethan. She quickly stepped forward. Adrian, you just broke your fever, why are you up? I told you to rest. The name hit Ethan like a trigger. He turned instinctively, and there he was. A man in a pale blue and white shirt, complexion still ghostly from illness, stepping into the hallway. Their eyes met. Adrian gave a faint, surprised smile, then turned to Vivian. It was stuffy in there. Thought I'd get some air. Who's this? Vivian's gaze darkened just slightly. He's Ethan. Works in the design department at my brother Ryan's company. Barely know him. Ethan caught that pause. Barely know him? Adrian smiled politely. His tone was gentle. Nice to meet you, Ethan. Head looks pretty banged up, accident? Ethan nodded. Yeah. Car crash. Mild concussion. I'm dealing with some memory low. Before he could finish, a nurse's voice rang out behind him. Patient 1124, Ethan, it's time for your scan. Ethan turned toward the call. He didn't have the energy for small talk with people who felt like strangers. He offered a quick, neutral farewell and wheeled himself toward the elevator. He didn't look back. But behind him, Vivian did something she hadn't expected to do. She watched him go. Watched him disappear around the corner without a second glance. That's it? She thought, frowning. He's not following me. Not even trying to talk. Every time they crossed paths before, he'd clung to her like a shadow, tenacious, persistent, always trying to prove something. But now? Now he just left. Without a word. Without even looking at her twice. The scans didn't take long. After the routine checkups were finished, Ethan stopped by the pharmacy to pick up his medication. On the way back, he passed by the hospital's ground floor garden. The sun was out. Bright and warm, for once. A quiet stretch of late afternoon light filtered through the trees. Without thinking too hard, he turned and wheeled himself into the garden, toward the sunlight. Just for a moment. Just to breathe. Ethan had just reached the edge of the courtyard fountain when Adrian appeared again, walking straight toward him. Ethan, he called out. Out getting some air too? Small world. Ethan hadn't expected to run into him again so soon, but he offered a polite nod and exchanged a few courteous words. Adrian, clearly the warm and talkative type, didn't hesitate to fall into step beside him, this time even taking hold of the wheelchair handles, gently pushing him along without being asked. Vivian just got a call and had to step away for a bit, Adrian explained cheerfully. I was getting kind of bored on my own, so, why don't we chat for a while? His tone was light, almost conspiratorial. You're Ryan's friend, right? And you've worked with Vivian for years now. I was wondering, back when I was in Canada, I heard about some guy who chased Vivian for, 7 years. Relentless guy. Do you have any idea who that was? And, how did Vivian feel about him? Ethan froze for a second, but only a second. Then he looked straight ahead, voice steady, tone unreadable. No idea who he was. But if someone chased her for 7 years and she still only had eyes for you, well, I guess that says it all, doesn't it? You're the one who mattered. No one else ever did. Adrian looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his tone. His expression softened, and he let out a sheepish chuckle. She talked about me? Like, often? Ethan remembered what Ryan had said, how deeply Vivian had loved Adrian. He gave a small nod. Yeah. She did. Color rose to Adrian's cheeks, and his eyes brightened. Vivian was a year ahead of me, he said, his voice drifting into memory. She was the girl on campus, brilliant, gorgeous, kind of a legend. Guys lined up to ask her out, but somehow, she fell for me. Hard. She chased me for months before I finally gave her a chance. After that, she gave me everything, walked me to class, studied with me at the library, covered the campus in roses for our anniversary. She even got jealous if anyone so much as flirted with me. We were together for 4 years. Everyone said I was the love of her life. She told me that too, over and over again. Said she'd marry me after graduation. He paused, his smile faltering just slightly. But I didn't want to stay here. I had bigger dreams, you know. I wanted more. So I turned her down. Told her I couldn't give her what she wanted. And then I left. His eyes drifted toward the horizon, distant. I've always known she never really moved on. That's why I came back. When my flight landed in Crestwood, I'll admit, I had my doubts, Adrian said, walking slowly alongside the wheelchair. But the second I saw her at the airport, standing in the pouring rain, grabbing my bags like it was still us against the world, I just knew. Nothing had really changed. He let out a small sigh. I caught a cold a few days ago, nothing serious. But she's been taking care of me the whole time. Really taking care of me. I can tell she wants to get back together. She hasn't said it, not yet, but I feel it. Adrian glanced at Ethan, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. I was worried, though. Thought maybe she had feelings for someone else now. That's kind of why I asked earlier. I guess I was looking for some reassurance. Ethan listened quietly, unmoved. No jealousy. No bitterness. Just a faint, detached smile. If she still cares that much, he said softly, she's probably just waiting for the right moment. Maybe she's planning a surprise. Adrian's shoulders relaxed, a smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, maybe you're right. He lifted a hand to wave goodbye, but in the motion, his phone slipped from his hand and dropped straight into the fountain with a plop. Damn, he gasped, immediately bending down to retrieve it, but lost his balance and fell headfirst into the water. The splash echoed across the garden. Ethan blinked, startled. For a beat, he froze. Then he spun his wheelchair around and tried to flag someone down. But before he could even call out, a blur of motion flashed into the corner of his vision. Vivian. She was running, sprinting, across the garden like nothing else existed. Without a second of hesitation, she dove straight into the water and dragged Adrian out, soaking wet and coughing, but conscious. Only when he finally coughed up the water and took a full breath did her expression soften, her frantic worry giving way to visible relief. Ethan watched it all. Every beat of it. The way she held Adrian. The way she looked at him. Every reaction was raw, visceral, unfiltered. Ethan turned to roll away, he should have been the one to find a doctor. But before he could go far, her voice cracked through the air like a whip. You pushed him, didn't you? He stopped dead. What? He said, spinning halfway back. No. He dropped his phone. He bent down and slipped. I was just going to get help. Cut the crap. Her voice was ice. Vivian marched toward him, eyes blazing. I was gone for 2 minutes, she snapped. 2 minutes, and Adrian somehow ends up in the fountain. You expect me to believe that's a coincidence? Ethan stared at her, stunned. You really think I'd hurt someone? I didn't push him. I swear. Vivian didn't flinch. Swear all you want. You've always hated that he came back. You've always clung to me like some shadow I couldn't shake. But Adrian is my line, Ethan. Then, before he could even react, she gripped the handles of his wheelchair and shoved him, hard, straight into the water. He hit the surface with a splash and sank beneath it, the weight of the chair pulling him down. Her voice came cold and sharp over the edge. You don't get to cross that line and walk away. She turned to the nearby staff. Lock it down, she ordered the security team she had brought with her. No one goes in. No one pulls him out. The guards took their positions. No one moved. The icy water surged into Ethan's nose and mouth, flooding his lungs with every gasp. He thrashed beneath the surface, blind and choking. His wounded leg tore open again, hot blood blooming into the water around him like a slow explosion. His strength was draining fast. Pain overtook him, violent, consuming, until his whole body trembled uncontrollably. The surface faded further away, light dimming around him. And just before the darkness pulled him under completely, he saw one last image. Vivian. Walking away. Her arms wrapped tightly around Adrian. He didn't know how much time had passed. But when Ethan finally opened his eyes again, Ryan was leaning over him, eyes rimmed red with panic. I was only gone a few hours, he said, voice cracking. Just a few hours. What the hell happened? The doctor said if they'd pulled you out even a minute later, you might not have made it. Ethan stared at the ceiling, silent. The memories came back in shards, Vivian's fury, the push, the water, her walking away without looking back. He wanted to tell Ryan everything. Wanted to scream it. But then he remembered. Vivian wasn't just anyone. She was Ryan's sister. He swallowed the truth like glass and shook his head, slow and small. I'm fine, he said hoarsely. Don't worry about it. Ryan's eyes shimmered, but he didn't press. He just stayed. 4 days. He barely left the room, hovering nearby, watching over Ethan like a man trying to undo guilt with presence. More than once, he circled the topic, dancing around it in casual conversation. Look. I've known Vivian my whole life, he said during one quiet afternoon, pretending to scroll through his phone. You confessed to her so many times. Anyone else, she would have shut that down fast. But she let you stick around. 4 years. That's not nothing. She might not even realize it herself, but I think, there's something there. Are you really planning to just forget her? If he'd heard that right after waking up, before the garden, before the water, Ethan might have believed him. But now? Now it just sounded like denial dressed up as hope. Wordlessly, he pulled out his phone and handed it to Ryan. A few photos filled the screen, taken by co-workers who'd run into Vivian out and about. She was with Adrian. Shopping. Dinner. A movie. In every frame, she looked relaxed. Smiling. Happy. Ethan's voice was flat. Hollow. She tolerated me all those years because of you. That's all. And now that I've lost the memories, I take it as a sign, I was never meant to keep them. He paused, then finished the thought with quiet finality. She waited for Adrian. He's back. That chapter's closed for me. Ryan looked at the pictures, then back at Ethan. There was nothing more to say. He just let out a long, weary sigh, and didn't bring her up again. I wanted nothing more than for Vivian to wake up and choose you, Ryan said quietly. If she had, we could have stayed in each other's lives forever. But if you're really letting go, then I won't push anymore. I won't get involved with her and Adrian again either. He paused, then smiled faintly. No matter what happens, you and I will always be brothers. Ethan nodded firmly and pulled him into a hug. They exchanged a few quiet words, the kind of things you say when everything's changed but you still want to hold on to something solid. Then Ryan stood up and went to handle the discharge papers. By that afternoon, they were in the car. "You've been stuck in that hospital way too long," Ryan said as they drove. "Let's celebrate. I'm putting a group together, calling some people, make it a real party." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Knowing this might be the last time he saw them all together, he didn't want to say no. They headed to a private lounge. But the moment they pushed open the door to the private room, both of them froze in place. Vivian and Adrian were sitting at the center of the room. Ryan's face was a mixture of shock and dread. What are you doing here?" One of their friends, grinning, waved them in. "Didn't you say the more, the merrier? So I invited Vivian, and she brought Adrian. Perfect, right?" Ryan's jaw tightened as he turned to the guy who said it, eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan caught the look and quickly pulled Ryan aside. "It's fine," he said, voice calm. "They're here, so what? I don't remember anything. It doesn't hurt." Ryan hesitated, studying his expression, then finally gave in with a sigh and led him over to join the group. The room was loud. The kind of celebratory chaos that usually came with old friends, cheap drinks, and too much shared history. But beneath the surface, the tension hummed. Vivian barely looked up. Her eyes were fixed on Adrian all night. She blocked drink after drink for him with practiced ease, peeled fruit and fed it to him like it was the most natural thing in the world. Every movement was intimate, devoted, overflowing with care. She didn't try to hide it. Ethan watched it all. And though something heavy pressed against his chest, it didn't break him. Maybe forgetting really was a blessing. Maybe the loss of those memories had spared him from deeper pain. Ryan, misreading the silence, assumed Ethan was spiraling. In a burst of nervous energy, he rallied everyone into playing party games. Ethan played along. His luck was unreal, 10 wins in a row. The table erupted in cheers and teasing every time. But when he finally lost a round, the chants changed. "Penalty. Penalty." He sighed. "Truth or dare?" The crowd roared back, "Truth." Someone leaned in, grinning wickedly. "All right, Ethan, tell us about the most unforgettable love of your life." The room fell into a hush. All eyes drifted toward him, and toward Vivian. And before Ethan could say a single word, her expression changed, sudden, sharp, and unmistakably tense. She looked at him, just for a second, but that one glance said everything. Cold. Sharp. Warning. Ethan understood. She didn't want him saying anything reckless in front of Adrian. But the truth was, he didn't remember enough to even try. So he offered what little he had, his voice light, his smile casual. "My most unforgettable love?" He paused, then gave a dry little laugh. "Probably my first crush. She was my best friend's sister. Think it was love at first sight. I wrote her a whole stack of letters, whole notebooks full. Took so many secret photos I could have filled an album. Everyone knew how hard I fell for her." He shrugged, tone almost teasing. "Problem was, she never liked me back." The room went silent. Utterly, painfully silent. Adrian, who'd been sitting quietly until now, turned to look at Vivian. Her face had darkened. Sensing the tension, Adrian reached over and gently touched her arm. "Vivian, you and Ethan." Vivian stiffened. Her fingers curled around his hand like a vice. "There's nothing between us," she said coldly. "There never was." Her voice was firm. Unapologetic. "He's been hung up on me for years, sure. But it was always one-sided. I never encouraged it. He made it all up in his head. Chapter 5. Each word struck with deliberate finality. No hesitation. No remorse. Then, without another glance, Vivian stood and pulled Adrian with her. Together, they left the room, slow, deliberate steps echoing in the stunned silence. The party was over. What remained was a heavy air of pity. Most people stared at Ethan with quiet sympathy. Ryan said nothing. But his eyes were burning. Then, without warning, he bolted out of the room. Ethan knew exactly where he was going. He pushed through the hallway, caught up in the momentum, and found them in the garage. Ryan and Vivian. Yelling. "Ethan's my brother!" Ryan shouted, chest heaving. "How could you humiliate him like that? In front of everyone? He loved you for years. Couldn't you at least show him some decency? Some basic respect for what he felt?" Vivian crossed her arms, chin lifting defiantly. "I tolerated him for 7 years. I turned him down, politely, repeatedly, only because of you. What more do you want from me? His obsession brought me nothing but discomfort." Ryan looked like he'd been slapped. His voice rose with fury and disbelief. "You don't get it, do you? It's over. He's done with you. Ever since you left him on the side of the road that night, he got into that accident, Vivian. A concussion. Memory loss." Vivian didn't flinch. "I drove him home that night because I felt obligated, not because I cared. And yeah, I left him. I'd do it again. 100 times. For Adrian. I'd leave him 100 more." She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "If he's still bitter about that night, then do me a favor and tell him to stay the hell away from me." Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Ethan stepped back into the shadows. He didn't want them to know he'd heard. He didn't want to see the look on Ryan's face when he realized. And more than anything, he didn't want to feel what he was already starting to feel. Back at home, Ethan stood in the middle of his apartment, letting his eyes drift slowly over the space. It felt foreign now. Like a museum of someone else's obsession. He moved quietly from shelf to drawer, collecting every last trace of her: photos, keepsakes, old notes, concert tickets, even the little things he'd once considered sacred. All of it. Into the trash. No hesitation. No ceremony. That weekend, he stayed in. Packed his bags. Cleared out drawers. Tied up the loose ends of a life he was ready to leave behind. By Monday morning, everything was ready. Ethan returned to the office and handed his resignation letter to HR. The moment she read it, the woman behind the desk froze. "Wait, what? You're still on medical leave from the accident. And I heard the design director role just opened up. Ms. Sterling's considering you for the promotion. Why are you resigning?" According to Ryan, back when Ethan graduated, he'd applied to Sterling Enterprises just to be near Vivian, joining the design department so he could see her every day, stand beside her under the excuse of work. For 3 years, he gave it everything. But now? He didn't remember the feeling that had driven him. He didn't remember her face when he first fell. All he knew was that whatever love once consumed him, was gone. So he just smiled, soft and polite. "I'm heading home," he said. "Permanently. I'll be in Seabrook from now on." The HR rep gave him a long look but didn't push. She stamped the form and slid it across the desk. "All right. I'll send this over to Ms. Sterling for final approval. Once she signs, your exit process will be complete." On the way back from HR, Ethan got stopped by a colleague. "Hey, Ms. Sterling just called a meeting for the whole department. Word is, she's announcing the new director. It's starting any minute, come with us." Ethan nodded and followed them down the hall. Along the way, several co-workers clapped him on the shoulder, beaming. "You've been the backbone of this team for 3 years," one said. "You've led some of our biggest projects, and don't even get me started on the international awards you've won. If this job isn't yours, I don't know what is." "Exactly," another chimed in. "Ms. Sterling has nothing but praise for you. If you take over, we'll all be behind you 100%. But heads up, if it gets announced today, you are taking us out for drinks tonight." They laughed. Ethan smiled. He knew these people. He knew their long hours, their dedication, their genuine belief in him. And for the first time in a long time, he realized just how far he'd come, how much of his life had been built outside the shadow of one woman. Ethan had planned to tell his team about his resignation right then and there, but with Vivian's signature still pending, he decided to wait until dinner. "Whether or not I'm made director doesn't really matter," he said lightly. "But I am treating everyone to dinner tonight. Got a bit of news I want to share with you all." The group walked together, laughing, tossing guesses about who the new director might be. Ethan trailed just a step behind, eventually taking a seat in the far corner of the meeting room. A few minutes later, right on schedule, Vivian walked in. She swept a quick glance around the room and got straight to the point. "I'm sure most of you have heard the rumors by now," she began coolly. "Today's meeting is to formally announce the new head of the design department. If anyone has thoughts, feel free to speak up." Every pair of eyes shifted toward Ethan. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on him, but he knew what was coming, and he wanted to stop it before it unfolded. So after a brief moment of hesitation, he rose to his feet, meeting Vivian's unreadable gaze with quiet resolve. "Thank you for the trust you've placed in me these past few years," he said. "It's meant a lot to lead so many of our key projects, and to see them through with this incredible team. I don't know who you've chosen for the role, but before anything's made official, I'd like to formally withdraw." But he didn't get the chance to finish. Vivian cut him off mid-sentence, her tone clipped and cold. "I've reviewed the work of our 10 current designers. While some of you have strong portfolios, Ethan included, the reality is, none of you are quite ready for this role. Ethan, your work speaks for itself, but your tenure here is too short." She paused, letting the silence settle. "So I've decided to bring in someone from outside. Someone with the experience and seniority this position demands." The entire room tensed. Ethan froze. Then came the blow. "I'd like to introduce your new design director," she said, her voice ringing out across the room. "Adrian." Bang. The door swung open. Adrian entered with a polished smile, completely at ease as he strode to the front of the room. "Hey everyone," he said smoothly. "I'm Adrian. I hold a PhD from the Milan Institute of Design and was recently awarded the European Young Designers Prize." His voice faded into the background as the shock settled in. No one spoke. The room had gone eerily still. Co-workers exchanged glances, tight-lipped, uncomfortable. Expressions flickered between disbelief and awkward restraint. No one had seen this coming. There was no other reason behind the tension, only the simple fact that several designers in the room had also won the same awards Adrian listed in his self-introduction. And unlike them, Adrian had zero real-world experience. No job history. Fresh out of school and dropped straight into the top spot. It didn't sit well with anyone. Especially not with the senior designers, some of whom had been with the company for over 5 years. One of them finally spoke up. "With all due respect, we believe Mr. Marlowe still lacks the professional experience needed to lead the department. A couple more years to gain hands-on exposure would serve him well. In contrast, Ethan has already proven he's capable of taking on this role." The moment someone voiced it, murmurs of agreement swept across the room. Heads nodded. Whispers turned to quiet support. Adrian's face paled. His eyes welled up. He turned to Vivian with a wounded look. She saw it. And in a split second, the softness on her face sharpened into something hard and cold. Her gaze snapped back to Ethan, sharp as ice. Adrian is a top graduate from one of the world's best design schools. His awards are internationally recognized. His insight and creative vision are far beyond what Ethan can offer. Her voice was steady, every word calibrated. Yes, Ethan has worked on many projects, but only because of the solid foundation this department built beneath him. Everything he accomplished was made possible by the team around him. Hand those same resources to Adrian, and he'll deliver results just as good, if not better. Her tone was final. That's why this position belongs to Adrian. There's no need for further discussion. The room fell silent again. Ethan said nothing, but his face had gone pale. He no longer loved her, but even without the affection, being publicly dismissed, compared, and cut down so surgically, it stung. Vivian offered no room for rebuttal. She simply closed the meeting. And then, without another word, she turned on her heel and walked out, Adrian close behind. Out in the hallway, the HR manager was waiting. She stepped forward and held out a document. "Ms. Sterling, I have a resignation form that requires your signature." Vivian barely glanced at it. She took the pen and signed without a word. Then she walked off, fingers laced tightly with Adrian's. Ethan stood by the conference table, watching them disappear. A moment later, the rest of the design team surrounded him. Hands clapped his back. Voices offered sympathy and outrage. Everyone tried to console him. But Ethan remained calm. He smiled. Not bitter. Not broken. Just, done. He looked down at the resignation letter, now signed and sealed, and tightened his grip around the paper. "The position never really mattered," he said softly. "I'd already decided to resign. Ms. Sterling just finalized it for me." He glanced around the room, at the colleagues he'd spent years building with. "Today's my last day. After this, I'm heading home for good. Thank you all, for everything." He paused, then added with quiet warmth. "The road's long. If fate crosses our paths again, I hope we meet with smiles." When word spread that Ethan was leaving the company, everyone was stunned. No one had expected it, not after everything he'd built there. A few even tried to rally support, saying they'd speak to Ms. Sterling, try to get the director role reassigned, overturn her decision. But Ethan just smiled, gently shaking his head. He thanked them all, one by one, and returned to his desk to quietly begin packing up his things. That evening, he took the whole team out for dinner. They laughed, lingered, exchanged stories, but beneath it all was a shared melancholy. Everyone could feel it, something good was ending. After the goodbyes, Ethan returned to his apartment and called a real estate agent. He listed the unit at the lowest possible price, and by the next morning, it had already sold. He finalized the paperwork quickly and arranged to vacate the place in 2 days. As soon as everything was squared away, his phone rang. It was Ryan. "Don't tell me you forgot, tomorrow's my birthday," Ryan teased. "You better not show up empty-handed. I've been waiting all year for your gift." Ethan laughed, his voice warm. "Forget your birthday? Not a chance. Your gift's ready, I'll bring it to you personally." But he wasn't just bringing a present. He was going to tell Ryan everything, that he was leaving Crestwood, maybe for good. In past years, Ethan always arrived early to Ryan's birthday party, using it as an excuse to be around Vivian just a little longer. But not this time. This time, he waited until halfway through the evening before calling a cab and heading over. As usual, the celebration was held at Sterling Manor. He'd been there more times than he could count, knew the place like the back of his hand. So instead of using the main entrance, he slipped in through the side gate and made his way inside quietly. By the time he arrived, everyone was gathered in the great hall for the candle lighting. Ryan stood at the center, surrounded by friends, glowing with happiness. His parents were beside him, smiling proudly. And on his other side, Vivian stood with Adrian, her hand gently resting on his arm. They looked serene, content. Almost like a family already. Ethan stayed in the shadows, watching. Just then, he overheard a couple of house staff whispering nearby. "I really thought Miss Vivian and Mr. Marlowe were done for good," one said in hushed tones. "Didn't expect them to come full circle. He must have really loved her, to wait this long." "Right," said another. "That poor guy, Ryan's friend, chased after her for years and never got anywhere. But with Mr. Marlowe, it's like she never stopped loving him. She's always dodged those marriage talks her parents kept bringing up. But bringing Adrian home tonight? That's a statement. If you ask me, they'll be engaged before the year's out." Ethan had let go of everything connected to Vivian. The memories, the feelings, they were gone. Who she loved, who she married, where her life went from here, none of it concerned him anymore. So when he overheard those whispers again, he didn't feel anything at all. He stayed quietly in the back, joining in the birthday song like any other guest. When it ended, he looked up, and met Vivian's eyes across the room. Her brow furrowed as soon as she saw him. She leaned toward Ryan, whispered something, and Ryan immediately turned, scanning the crowd until he found Ethan. A smile broke across his face as he pushed his way through the guests. Ethan greeted him with a quiet hug and handed over a carefully wrapped gift. "Happy birthday," he said, genuinely. Ryan beamed. "Finally. Come on, let's go grab some cake." But Ethan shook his head. "It's a little loud in here," he said with a small smile. "You go enjoy. I'll wait for you upstairs. There's something I want to talk to you about later." Ryan hesitated. He didn't want Ethan to feel left out, especially not with Vivian and Adrian here, but he also knew how hard the evening might be for him. So he nodded. "All right. I'll be up in a bit." Ethan slipped away from the crowd and made his way upstairs to Ryan's room. He knew the way blindfolded. He sat on the couch, letting the quiet settle around him, the dull throb of party noise muffled by thick walls. After a while, sleepiness crept in, and he closed his eyes, resting his head back. Some time later, the door creaked open. Ethan stirred, thinking it was Ryan. But when he opened his eyes, it wasn't Ryan standing there. It was Adrian. His expression was cold. Unwelcoming. The door shut behind him with a soft click as he stepped forward, voice tight and confrontational. "I thought you said you'd given up," he said. "So why do you keep showing up around Vivian?" Ethan blinked, still half shaking off sleep, confused for a moment by the hostility. "Adrian didn't wait. She only loves me. She always has. You can pull whatever pathetic stunts you want, but she'll never want you. You'll never beat me." Ethan sat up slowly, trying to process how they got here. "I'm here to give Ryan his birthday gift," he said evenly. "That's all. I'm leaving soon." But Adrian's eyes didn't soften. If anything, the suspicion in them deepened, hardening into contempt. "Oh please," he sneered. "You've been clinging to her for years, shamelessly hanging around, hoping for scraps. The only reason you even got close was because Ryan's her brother. If he weren't such a bleeding heart idiot, you'd have been out of the picture a long time ago." He let the words hang there, poisonous and deliberate. A disgrace, really. Vivian deserves better than someone who doesn't know when to quit. Ethan sat still, unfazed. No reaction. No fire. No need to prove anything. Because he knew who he was. And Adrian's opinion didn't matter. Not anymore, but the moment Adrian began insulting Ryan, something in Ethan's expression shifted. His gaze turned cold. "I wonder," he said quietly, "does Vivian know you talk this way about her own blood?" Adrian snorted. "Vivian worships me. She'd defend me no matter what I said. So what if I insult her brother? She'll still choose me, she always will. He stepped closer, sneering now. Besides, you and Ryan? You're just two pathetic leeches. Cowardly, shameless, desperate. Am I wrong? You're only angry because I hit a nerve. You know it's true. Ethan didn't flinch. You want to talk about shame, he said, voice calm but cutting. 7 years ago, you broke up with her out of nowhere and left the country. She nearly drank herself into an early grave. Ryan watched her fall apart, and not once did he say a word against you. And now you come crawling back, cursing the same brother who's protected her all this time? He stepped forward, eyes blazing. Tell me, Adrian, who's really disgusting here? The words landed hard. Adrian's face contorted with rage. Without thinking, he swung. The slap echoed through the room. But Ethan didn't hesitate, he hit back. Adrian stumbled, clutching his face, tears springing to his eyes as anger boiled over. With a roar, he lunged. The two of them crashed into each other, fists flying, furniture toppling in their wake. Ethan grabbed a fistful of Adrian's hair, shoving him backward as they grappled blindly. In the chaos, someone knocked over a table. A scented candle tipped, flames licking across the bedspread, then leaping to the rug. The fire spread with terrifying speed. Thick smoke poured into the air. By the time they noticed, the room was already a furnace. Ethan bolted for the door, but Adrian grabbed him and shoved him straight into the fire. The flames seared his skin instantly. Heat roared around him, wild and unrelenting. He dropped to the floor, trying to smother the blaze crawling up his arms, choking on the smoke that tore through his throat like knives. And then... crash! The door burst open. Vivian. She stood just meters away, eyes darting around the room. For a moment, just one, her gaze landed on Ethan. But only for a heartbeat. Then she saw Adrian. Without a second of hesitation, she ran to him. She didn't ask questions. Didn't look back. She grabbed him, hoisted him up, and dragged him toward the door. Ethan reached out, barely conscious. His skin blistered, his fingers scorched, he lifted one trembling hand, and caught the edge of her pant leg. She paused. Looked down. Then yanked her leg free and kept moving. No words. No glance back. Just the sound of her footsteps fading through the smoke. Ethan watched her vanish into the haze. And then the world collapsed into black. Ethan hadn't expected to wake up again. But when he did, the first thing he saw was Ryan, eyes swollen and red from crying, seated right beside him. Thank God, Ryan choked out. I thought we were gonna lose you. If something had happened, I would have carried that guilt for the rest of my life. He reached for Ethan's hand, then immediately winced when he saw the bandages. Does it hurt? I called in the best surgeons I could find. I swear, there won't be a scar left when they're done. Ethan smiled faintly, though the searing pain in his hand nearly took his breath away. It's nothing, he said. Just a few burns. Don't blame yourself. And don't worry. He reached out and patted Ryan's shoulder with his good hand, steady despite the tremor in his arm. There's something I meant to tell you yesterday, but I didn't get the chance. It might be a little late now, but promise me you won't get mad. Ryan blinked, confused. I'm heading back to Seabrook this afternoon. My family's been pushing me to settle down, and I finally gave in. The ticket's already booked. Will you come send me off? Ryan froze. What? You're leaving? Today? And getting married? Just like that? His voice cracked, and fresh tears slipped down his face. If you leave now, who am I supposed to hang out with? Who's gonna put up with me the way you do? Ethan exhaled softly, reaching out again to comfort him. It's time, Ryan. I need to start over. And you'll be just fine. They talked for a long time, lingering in the quiet between words, saying things they hadn't said in years. Eventually, Ryan wiped his face and went to start the discharge paperwork, still sniffling as he left the room. Ethan, jaw tight from pain, slowly began to change out of the hospital gown. The bandages pulled against his raw skin. Just as he was fastening the last button, the door burst open. Vivian stormed in, eyes cold, jaw clenched. "So," she spat, "you hit Adrian. And then you set the room on fire to kill him. Didn't you?" Ethan turned, slow and expressionless. Seeing her again stirred nothing. No pain. No longing. Just emptiness. "Is that what he told you?" he asked, his voice flat. "You really believe that? Without proof?" Vivian didn't hesitate. "I don't need proof. Whatever Adrian says, I believe him. Unconditionally." She didn't even blink. Didn't pause long enough to let his words land. It didn't matter to her. Ethan gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "I see. So that's what you came here for?" Her eyes narrowed. "I came to get you to apologize." Then, without warning, she grabbed his injured arm and yanked it. Pain shot through his entire body as fresh blood seeped through the bandages. Ethan gasped, the agony so sharp it blurred his vision, but still, he didn't cry. Instead, he struggled, teeth clenched, trying to pull his arm away. "Let me go," he growled. The door slammed open just as Vivian was dragging Ethan by his injured arm. Ryan stood there. His eyes widened, then, in the next instant, he was between them, shielding Ethan with his whole body. Vivian's glare didn't waver. Her voice was sharp and commanding. "Move. He will apologize to Adrian today." Ryan stood firm. "I'm not moving," he said, voice raw. "I know Ethan didn't do anything wrong. You want to defend Adrian, fine. But that doesn't make Ethan guilty." He stepped forward, trembling but resolute. "There's a security camera in my room," he said. "Everything that happened last night is recorded. If you want an apology, then we'll watch the footage together. Until then, you don't get to demand anything." Vivian's face twisted in frustration, the veins in her temple visibly pulsing. She opened her mouth to snap back, but just then, her phone buzzed. A message from Adrian. She read it, face tightening even more. Swallowing her fury, she turned on her heel. "Fine," she spat. "We'll watch the footage tonight. And when the evidence proves it, let's see what excuse you come up with." With that, she slammed the door behind her. Silence returned. Ryan immediately turned back to Ethan, gently helping him sit and redressing the bandages she'd torn open. His hands were shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have come back sooner." Ethan gave a tired smile and shook his head. He reached up and brushed away the tears gathering at the corners of Ryan's eyes. "No need to say sorry," he said quietly. "Because the truth is, we never did anything wrong." He exhaled slowly. "I'm leaving soon, Ryan. You've got to take care of yourself. Promise me?" Ryan nodded hard, eyes wet again. After that, they left the hospital together. Ryan helped Ethan pick up his things and took him straight to the airport. The announcement for Ethan's flight to Seabrook was already ringing through the terminal. At the gate, the two embraced one last time. Ryan clung to him a little longer than expected, but Ethan eventually pulled away with a smile and turned to walk toward the boarding line, no hesitation in his steps. Once seated on the plane, he pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts and erased every trace of Vivian. Every number. Every chat thread. Every picture. Gone. Just then, a new message came through, from Ryan. Promise me you'll be happy every day from now on. And don't worry, I'll get to the bottom of this tonight. You deserve the truth." Ethan looked at the screen for a moment, smiling softly, then let it fade to black. He turned to the window, watching as clouds drifted past in the golden light. Truth. Justice. None of it mattered anymore. Because Vivian, and all the pain she had ever brought with her, had already vanished from his memory. From his world. And now, he was finally leaving it all behind. Completely. Forever. Dragging his suitcase behind him, Ethan stood in front of the door, exhaustion written all over his face. He glanced down at the bandages peeking out from under his sleeve and carefully tugged the fabric to hide them. Once he was sure nothing looked out of place, he raised his hand and knocked. "Who is it?" came Helen's voice from inside. When she opened the door and saw him, her eyes widened in surprise. "You really came back? I thought you were just bluffing on the phone." Then she turned her head and called out, "Thomas. It's Ethan, he's really home." "What? He's here?" Thomas sprang up from the sofa and rushed to the door. He reached out and took the suitcase from Ethan, pulling it inside, while Helen linked her arm through Ethan's and ushered him in with affectionate urgency. "I can't believe you're actually here. What about you and Vivian?" Before she could finish, Ethan gently cut her off. "I was in a car accident. I lost my memory. Everything about her, it's all gone." Helen gasped, immediately reaching out to check him over. "You what? Ethan, are you okay? We need to take you to the doctor." But Ethan quickly stepped back, not wanting her to see the injuries on his hand. "I'm fine now," he said softly. "You really don't have to worry." He paused, then added, almost as if confessing something to himself. "I was blind, chasing something I shouldn't have. Loving someone who never loved me back, for years. Maybe losing my memory was a blessing in disguise. Like the universe giving me a chance to start over." He looked up at them, trying to keep his voice steady. "You mentioned a marriage agreement before. I never wanted to go through with it, probably hurt a lot of feelings back then, but now that I'm home, maybe it's time I meet her." Thomas and Helen exchanged a glance, and then suddenly burst out laughing. Helen gave Ethan a playful push and pulled him into a hug. "Oh, you idiot," she said, wiping at her eyes. "There's no engagement. We made that up to distract you. You were so wrapped up in that girl, head over heels for someone who never gave you the time of day. We just wanted to give you something else to think about. There's no real promise, no pressure." Thomas smiled and pulled them both close. "You can love whoever you want. You're free. But that girl, Vivian, she drained the life out of you. We watched you give her everything, and she gave nothing back. That kind of love, it only breaks you." Ethan stood there, quiet. And then, he couldn't help it. His eyes turned red, his throat tightened, and he pulled them both into his arms. For the first time in a long time, he felt safe. He was finally home. "Yeah, I know," Ethan said softly. "Maybe losing my memory was God's way of giving me another chance. I won't fall for her again." The next couple of days at home were peaceful, perhaps the first truly peaceful days Ethan had known in years. Helen and Thomas doted on him, and for once, he let them. But he didn't want to stay still for long. Ethan was ready to start over. He sent out several job applications, and soon, an invitation arrived from Rivers Corporation, one of the most respected firms in Seabrook. That afternoon, as he slipped on his shoes near the door, he called out toward the kitchen, "I've got an interview, heading out now." Helen peeked her head around the corner. "Be careful, sweetheart. And don't forget to breathe." Outside the building, Ethan arrived early. With time to spare, he decided to grab a coffee at the cafe across the street. Order 627, ready for pickup. Ethan stepped up to the counter to claim his drink, just as another hand reached out for the same cup. "Sorry," he said quickly, pulling back and double-checking his receipt. He glanced up, a bit confused, and locked eyes with the woman beside him. She held up her own cup with a small smile. "Mine's 626. Guess the barista called the wrong number." At that moment, the barista appeared with another cup. "Sorry about that, sir. Here's your coffee, this one's yours." Ethan took it with a smile and waved it off. "No worries." As he turned to leave, the woman stepped beside him. "Hey, I'm Natalie," she said, extending a hand. "I work at Rivers too. Who knows, maybe we'll end up as co-workers." Surprised, Ethan shook her hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ethan." She tilted her head slightly at the name, as if it rang a bell, but she didn't dwell on it. "Well, good luck with your interview," she said. "Maybe I'll see you around." Neither of them expected just how soon "around" would come. Later that day, Ethan stepped into the interview room, resume in hand, only to see Natalie sitting at the center of the panel. He froze. For a second, he completely forgot his introduction. Natalie, head down, was checking something on her phone. When she realized the room had gone quiet, she looked up, eyes widening slightly when she saw him. "Hello," Ethan finally began, recovering. "Good afternoon. I'm Ethan. I graduated from." The interview went smoothly. By the end of the day, he had a start date. A new city. A new job. And maybe, just maybe, the start of something else. As Ethan stepped out of the building, he heard his name called from behind. "Ethan." He turned to see Natalie jogging lightly to catch up with him, smiling as she fell into step beside him. "Small world," she said. "Turns out I'm the manager of the design division at Rivers. So, technically, your boss." She gave a playful wink. "Since we're co-workers now, and it's getting late, how about I treat you to dinner?" Natalie's energy was warm, a little too forward for Ethan's comfort. He smiled politely and shook his head. "Thanks, but I've already got plans tonight." Her eyes flickered. "Plans, with your girlfriend?" she asked, a little too quickly. Ethan paused. He wasn't sure what she was getting at, but he still answered honestly. "No. Not a girlfriend." Natalie visibly relaxed. "Good," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Chapter 11. Ethan's first few weeks at Rivers Corporation went smoothly. He settled in quickly, his calm temperament and strong work ethic made him well-liked by the whole design team. Projects came easily, and the office environment was light and friendly. Mostly. Except for the roses. Ethan glanced down at the bouquet on his desk and sighed. He reached out, adjusted one of the stems, and sighed again. A colleague 2 desks away leaned over. "Another bouquet, Romeo? What is this, the 3rd one this week?" She grinned. "If someone sent me flowers every day, I'd be celebrating, not sighing." Ethan chuckled, pulling 2 roses from the bunch and handing them over. "Then I hope you find someone soon." He didn't say it out loud, but the flowers weren't really the problem. It was who they were from. Natalie. His manager. That added a layer of awkwardness to everything, especially since Ethan, still healing from everything with Vivian, had no intention of jumping into anything new. And while Natalie had been nothing but kind, her pursuit was beginning to make him uneasy. Workplace romances were complicated enough, add the manager-subordinate dynamic, and it was a potential minefield. Then came the next message. "Dinner tonight?" Ethan stared at the screen. Normally, he would have typed a gentle refusal and sent it without a second thought. But this time, his fingers hovered. And instead of hitting send on a rejection, he backspaced. "Sure." The reply came instantly. "Amazing. I'll make the reservation. Italian okay?" Perfect. He wasn't accepting because his feelings had changed. He just knew it was time to have the conversation. To set boundaries. To be clear. When Ethan arrived at the restaurant, Natalie was already there, waiting at a table by the window, smiling the moment she saw him. The waiter led Ethan to the table, where Natalie was already seated. The moment he sat down, she reached under the table and handed him a bouquet. "These are for you," she said, smiling softly. "Yesterday's roses, you gave them away. Was it because you didn't like them?" Ethan took the bouquet, leaned in, and breathed in the delicate scent. "No," he said gently. "I liked them. The flowers were beautiful." Natalie tilted her head. "What about the person who sent them?" That question hung in the air. Ethan faltered, unsure how to respond. After a pause, he exhaled slowly. "Natalie. I don't think this is right. You and me, I don't think we're a good match." "I'm serious about you, Ethan," she said, her voice low but steady. He couldn't give her an answer. Instead, he fell silent. In truth, Natalie had done everything right. Flowers arrived on his desk every morning, paired with thoughtful notes and small gifts, never excessive, never loud. At work, she kept a professional distance. Respectful. Balanced. Graceful in pursuit. But Ethan wasn't ready. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft strains of a violin playing in the background. "Let's eat," Natalie said finally, her voice quieter than before. Ethan picked up his fork, but the food held no appeal. He pushed it around his plate, barely taking a bite, but he reached for the wine more than once. Natalie gently slid the glass from his hand. "Don't drink too much. You'll get sick." Maybe it was the wine. Or maybe it was everything he hadn't said in weeks finally bubbling up. But Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused, and spoke. "I forgot her. I know I did. But why does it still hurt?" Natalie froze, her expression shifting. "What did she do to you?" she asked softly. Ethan let out a quiet, bitter laugh. His eyes were glassy. "I chased her for years. That's on me. But after I lost my memory, I really thought I was free." He paused, then his voice cracked a little. "But when she saw me drowning, she didn't even flinch. She walked away." His fingers trembled as he pulled back his sleeve and revealed the scar, still healing, still angry and red against his skin. Natalie's breath caught. Her eyes widened, and her fingers moved involuntarily toward him, hovering for a moment before gently brushing over the scar. Even without a full story, she could piece together the rest. Ethan had been betrayed. Badly. Deeply. No wonder he'd kept his distance. No wonder he'd said no. Her heart twisted as she looked at him. And then, wordlessly, she leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to the edge of the scar, like a vow only she could hear. "I'm going to help you forget her," she whispered. "And I'm going to make you fall in love again, with me. Mr. Marlowe, here are the design drafts for the new product line the group plans to launch," the young woman said, setting the folder gently on the edge of his desk. "If everything looks fine, I'll have them submitted for executive approval." Adrian Marlowe barely looked up. He flicked the pages once, glanced over a few mock-ups, then tossed the entire file to the side with a scoff. "This is what you brought for a C-level signature?" The woman flinched. Her hands trembled slightly. "It's the design finalized by Mr. Callahan and the rest of the team." You're telling me Ethan Callahan approved this?" Adrian's voice turned razor-sharp. He stood suddenly, sending a hard slap across the table. The file burst open and scattered like autumn leaves across the floor. "Tell Ms. Sterling," he said through clenched teeth, "that everything Ethan signed off on is garbage. I'll be handling the redesign personally, with a new direction." The woman opened her mouth as if to speak again, but Adrian cut her off. Did I stutter? Get out. Tears welled in her eyes. She dropped to her knees, gathered the papers as quickly as she could, and hurried out the door. Outside the office, several heads turned. What did Mr. Marlowe say? One colleague asked, eyeing the frazzled expression on her face. He rejected it, she said, voice breaking. He said he's redoing the whole thing with his own team. A wave of frustration swept through the design department. People murmured under their breath. They had seen it coming. It had only been a few days since Adrian took over, and every meeting had ended with someone humiliated. Not one of Ethan's previously approved projects had survived his scrutiny. Every design was rejected. Every critique came without explanation. And now this. I'm done, snapped one of the senior designers, yanking off his company badge and slamming it on the desk. That badge was the spark. The room lit up. Same here. I've been in this business 15 years, I don't need to be insulted by some self-important parachute executive. He's got no real vision, just a loud mouth. One after another, senior designers packed up their things and walked out, some openly cursing under their breath. By noon, HR had a stack of resignation letters from nearly half the design team. Caught off guard by the sudden exodus, the department head didn't know how to respond. There was only one course of action left. She forwarded everything directly to Vivian Sterling's office. What the hell did you do in the design department this time? Vivian's voice rang out sharp and furious as she shoved a stack of resignation letters across Adrian's desk. Adrian flinched. He had never seen her this angry before, especially not at him. His eyes reddened, wounded by the tone more than the words. I just thought their designs weren't up to par, he said, trying to justify himself. I told them to redo it. I didn't think they'd try to blackmail me with a mass resignation. Vivian took a breath, fingers pressing hard into her temple. Normally, she turned a blind eye to Adrian's behavior. As long as he didn't cross the line too far, she let him play his role. But this was different. 22 members of the design department had quit within a day. Production on the new jewelry line had stalled. Shareholders were asking questions. Numbers were slipping. She couldn't ignore it anymore. I think you should take some time off, she said firmly. I'll appoint a new director to manage the department. Once you've rested, you can work with him, together. It was a compromise. A graceful way to ease Adrian out without humiliating him. But Adrian didn't see it that way. He stared at her, incredulous. Then, with a flash of fury, he stormed out and slammed the door behind him. Vivian sat back in her chair, the tension still tight in her shoulders. Her mind drifted, uninvited, back to a different time, when Ethan was still at the company. Back then, the design department had never been in chaos. No mass resignations. No production delays. Ethan's work had consistently driven solid numbers. Customers loved it. Why am I thinking about him now? She shook the thought away and rubbed her brow. The memory of Adrian storming out with tear-filled eyes lingered. Guilt, or perhaps something else, made her sigh. She picked out a gift and messaged Adrian. It was my fault today. I bought you something. Let's have dinner tonight. Adrian smiled when the message popped up. He let her wait a few minutes before replying, just long enough to make her stew. Since you asked so nicely, fine. I suppose I'll forgive you. That evening, Vivian kept her promise. They had dinner, then took a long walk along the river, the city lights soft and golden on the water. Adrian slid an arm around her waist and said, "You've seemed tense lately. Why don't we go to an amusement park tomorrow? You need to unwind." Vivian almost declined. Roller coasters and cotton candy had never been her scene. But then, unexpectedly, an image flashed in her mind, Ethan laughing as the coaster took off, his hair pushed back by the wind, fearless and free. Before she knew it, she nodded. "Sure," she said. "Let's go." "Vivian. Vivian." It wasn't until Adrian called her name twice that Vivian finally snapped out of her daze. "What?" she asked, blinking. Adrian looked at her, clearly annoyed. "What's going on with you today? You've been spacing out all afternoon." Vivian didn't know how to answer. This amusement park, she had been here once before, with Ethan. And somehow, being back now stirred up memories she thought were long buried. Familiar sights kept triggering flashes of that day, his smile, their laughter, the Polaroid camera. Her silence only made Adrian more upset. Vivian quickly tried to recover. "I'm sorry. You wanted to ride the roller coaster, right? Let's do it. I'll come with you." Adrian's expression softened instantly, pleased by her sudden willingness. Vivian had always said no to these dangerous rides, as she called them. Before they boarded, Adrian discreetly slipped extra cash to the ride attendant to make sure they got a few extra photos. Vivian, on the other hand, was stiff as a board. Every second on the coaster felt like torture. By the time it finally screeched to a stop, she practically stumbled off. Adrian, unfazed, was already tugging her toward the photo viewing area. And that's when she saw it, on the massive wall of rider snapshots. A photo of her and Ethan. It was old, probably taken when Ethan was still in college. The memory came back in a flood. She, Ethan, and Ryan had come to the park that day. Ryan must have taken the photo with his Polaroid. And clearly, someone had thought it worthy of display. Vivian stood frozen in place. "The attendant said that wall over there's for couple photos," Adrian said cheerfully. "Let's hang ours up too." "No, wait," Vivian started, reaching for his arm. But it was too late. Adrian had already walked over. His eyes landed on the photo of her and Ethan. His expression darkened instantly. He yanked the photo off the wall and spun toward her, his voice cold and sharp. "So that's why you've been so out of it today. You're thinking about Ethan." Vivian opened her mouth, tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her silence said more than any excuse could have. Adrian's hands trembled with rage as he tore the photo into jagged pieces and hurled them into the nearby trash bin. Then, without another word, he stormed off. The date ended in silence. Vivian lingered. Slowly, she knelt beside the trash and began picking up the torn fragments of the photo. On the back of one torn piece, she saw handwriting. It was Ethan's. She'd know it anywhere. "Ethan loves Vivian." Vivian stared at the words, her heart caught in her throat. After a long pause, she tucked the broken pieces into her pocket, and walked away. Adrian stormed into his apartment and began thrashing the living room in a fit of rage. Books, photo frames, vases, everything came crashing to the floor as he vented his frustration. He unlocked his phone, expecting to see an apology message from Vivian. Nothing. Not a single word. Furious, Adrian hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud and clattered to the ground. Days passed. Vivian neither called nor messaged. She didn't even come by to check on him. Adrian's anger simmered, but he knew he couldn't afford to let it boil over anymore. Finally, swallowing his pride, he made his way to Vivian's office. "That day, I overreacted," he muttered, gently tugging on the sleeve of her blazer like a child asking for forgiveness. Vivian had been partly at fault too. And now that Adrian had come to apologize first, she chose not to push the issue further. "You should head back to work," she said simply, giving him an exit and a bit of dignity. Adrian quickly took it. "Let's not fight anymore, okay?" he added with a hopeful smile. Vivian merely gave a quiet Back in the design department, Adrian found someone already sitting in the deputy director's office, the new design director Vivian had promoted. Thinking of Vivian's earlier reprimand, Adrian forced a grin and tried to make small talk with the rest of the team. But no one responded. Not even a nod. His awkward wave hung in the air before he dropped his hand, the fake smile sliding off his face. As he walked back to his office, he could hear whispers behind him, low voices, muffled chuckles, not even bothering to hide their disdain. His embarrassment from the amusement park still fresh in his memory, Adrian lumped all of it, Vivian's coldness, the team's disrespect, his own sense of humiliation, onto one person. Ethan. The more Adrian stewed, the angrier he became. In a flash of fury, he swept everything off his desk. Pens, documents, folders, all went crashing to the floor in a chaotic mess. The noise startled everyone outside. Heads turned toward his office. Adrian glared through the glass wall, then stood up and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. Outside, tension hung thick in the air. "Who's going to talk to Mr. Marlowe about the design competition update?" someone asked. Everyone shook their heads. No one wanted to step into Adrian's warpath. Left with no choice, the deputy director sighed and picked up the task himself. He carefully stepped over the scattered papers and walked into Adrian's office, placing the updated competition guidelines neatly on the desk without saying a word. "There's a company-wide design competition this year," said the deputy director, placing a packet on Adrian's desk. "These are the submission guidelines. The CEO wants you to lead the design team and present an entry." Adrian only glanced at the packet when he heard it was a directive from Vivian. Then he waved his hand. "You can go." For once, Adrian kept a low profile over the next couple of days. He stayed holed up in his office, scribbling design drafts day and night. But no matter how many lines he sketched, he always ended up tearing the pages and tossing them into the trash. The truth was, Adrian wasn't exactly a design prodigy. Sure, he'd won a few awards in college, but in Sterling Enterprises, a company packed with elite talent, those accolades barely meant anything. If he'd allowed the team to collaborate, maybe the entry wouldn't be such a struggle. But no. Adrian was determined to prove one thing, that he was better than Ethan. He didn't want anyone else's ideas contaminating his vision. After all, he'd only become design director because Vivian fought tooth and nail to install him in that position. The whole department thought he'd pulled strings and didn't belong there. So now, he'd show them, he'd outshine Ethan. That was his only goal. One afternoon, while in Vivian's office, Adrian's eyes fell on a sketch, an intricately drawn design tucked between papers on her desk. "Vivian, whose sketch is this?" he asked, picking it up. Vivian glanced at it and instantly recognized it. It was Ethan's. She remembered the day he had come into her office, practically glowing with excitement. "Vivian, I designed this ring," Ethan had said. "It's called Spring. I got the idea from—" "Enough," she'd snapped. "Do you have to interrupt my work for this?" The memory hit her like a slap. She had tossed the design aside back then, not even looking at it. Ethan's face had fallen, the smile freezing before he quietly set the sketch beside her and walked out. Now, as she held the design again, her chest tightened. She stood still for a long moment before answering Adrian. "It's Ethan's," she said finally. Adrian's face darkened for the briefest moment, a flicker of jealousy flashing across his expression. He masked it quickly and set the sketch back down. "Was it ever produced?" Vivian didn't understand why he was asking but answered truthfully. "No. It wasn't." She hesitated, then added softly, "He designed it for me." A few days later, Adrian returned with the final competition sketch. Vivian looked over the page. The ring design was elegant, graceful, beautiful, even. But something about it struck her. It looked familiar. Almost too familiar. It resembled Spring, Ethan's old design. She paused, fingers grazing the edge of the page. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she stayed silent. Despite having finally gotten what she had longed for, Ethan out of her life, Vivian found herself thinking about him more and more lately. And she didn't know why. He had always been the one who wouldn't let go, who pestered her relentlessly. Now that he was gone, she should have felt relief, even peace. But instead, he lingered in her thoughts like a song she couldn't shake off. Maybe that's why, when she noticed Adrian's competition design bore a strong resemblance to Ethan's old sketch, she said nothing. "You've worked hard," Vivian told Adrian as she set the final draft aside. "Once the competition wraps up, let's take a vacation." Adrian looked up, stunned, and delighted. Their relationship had never quite deepened the way he wanted. Even though they were together in name, Adrian could always feel that Ethan's shadow still loomed large in Vivian's heart. She hadn't truly let go. And worse, she didn't hate Ethan the way he wished she would. That terrified Adrian. So when Vivian mentioned a vacation, he saw a rare chance to close that distance, maybe even turn things romantic. He reached out, pulled her into his arms, and leaned in for a kiss. Vivian leaned away, gently but firmly. "Working hours," she said coolly, reaching for another folder. "If there's nothing else, you can go." "Are you up for leading this design competition?" Natalie asked. Ethan stood from his seat in the conference room, surprised. "I've only just joined the company. Wouldn't it be better to let someone with more seniority take the lead?" "We discussed it as a team," Natalie replied. "Everyone agrees your work speaks for itself." Around the room, heads nodded in quiet confirmation. Seeing the unanimous support, Ethan didn't refuse again. "All right," he said, composed and confident. "I'll give it everything I've got. Thank you for the trust." After the morning meeting adjourned, Natalie motioned for Ethan to stay behind. "Yes, Ms. Rivers?" he asked. Natalie frowned. "Ethan, we're friends. Don't make it sound so formal." Since that night she took him home drunk, Ethan hadn't pushed Natalie away the way he used to. They had settled into a friendly rhythm, just friends for now, but Natalie clearly hoped for more. Thomas and Helen had taken a shine to her too. "That Natalie's a solid girl," they kept telling him. Still, Ethan wasn't ready for a relationship. He kept things light. "I should get going, if there's nothing else," he said, clearly avoiding anything personal. Natalie stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Sterling Enterprises is entering the competition too. I've got someone on the inside. Adrian is leading their design team." Ethan's expression didn't change, but his tone did. "I understand." The competition's theme was the 4 seasons. Immediately, Ethan thought of spring, the ring he once designed for Vivian. It had never been produced, but the idea had stayed with him. He decided to build a new collection around that original spark. A few days later, he handed Natalie the finalized drafts. Natalie flipped through the portfolio, her eyes lighting up. "These are incredible," she said. "Especially this one, spring. Absolutely stunning. The results should be announced in a week or 2, she added. "You'll come with me to the ceremony, right?" Ethan offered a modest smile, a little embarrassed by the praise. On the day the winners were to be announced, Ethan and Natalie boarded a flight to Crestwood together. From the moment they landed, Natalie could tell something was off. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Vivian's going to be there today. If you'd rather." "I'm fine," Ethan interrupted. "Vivian and I have nothing to do with each other anymore." Ethan had lost all memories of the life he once shared with Vivian. He didn't remember chasing after her with everything he had. He didn't remember how deeply she'd hurt him. But he remembered everything she had done after the accident, how she manipulated, ignored, and dismissed him. That was enough. He wanted no part of her anymore. At the event venue, Ethan walked in alongside Natalie and instantly spotted them, Vivian with her arm looped through Adrian's. They noticed him too. Adrian wasted no time. Smug and theatrical, he wrapped his arm around Vivian's waist and sauntered over. Well, well. What a coincidence, Adrian grinned. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't want to engage. He simply grabbed Natalie's hand and started walking past. But Adrian, thrilled by his own bravado, raised his voice. Is she your new girlfriend? Vivian's gaze snapped to Ethan and Natalie. She hated the way her chest tightened. Ethan didn't chase her anymore, had stopped long ago. She knew that. So why was she scared to hear him say yes? Ethan said nothing. And in that silence, Adrian puffed up. Still not over my girlfriend, are you? He sneered. Ethan opened his mouth, ready to shoot back, but Natalie stepped in front of him. Ethan is my boyfriend, she said coolly. So maybe try showing a little respect. She took Ethan's hand and pulled him away. Only after they'd found their seats did she glance sideways and say, sorry. He was just being so smug, I couldn't help myself. Ethan smiled. No need to apologize. Thanks for standing up for me. The results were about to be announced. Everyone sat quietly, tension thick in the air, waiting for the host to step up to the mic. Ethan found himself unusually nervous, palms slightly clammy as he stared at the stage. The host stepped forward, envelope in hand, ready to reveal the winner, when a man suddenly approached him from the wings and whispered something in his ear. The host's face shifted. He tapped the mic again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation. It appears a plagiarism incident has been discovered in this year's competition. In the interest of fairness, we will be investigating the matter and re-evaluating the results. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Plagiarism. That word alone was enough to destroy reputations. In an industry like this, it was a career death sentence. Originally, the organizers had planned to handle the situation privately. But under pressure from the audience, they relented. Two designs, side by side, flashed onto the massive screen behind the stage. Ethan's heart sank. One of them was his. And the other was Adrian's. He turned slowly to look at Adrian and Vivian. Adrian was already staring at him, a smirk spreading across his face like oil on water. Natalie leaned in immediately. Ethan, did anyone else see your sketches? She didn't doubt him, not for a second. But the implication was clear, someone must have stolen his work. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, then froze as Adrian stood up from his seat. I'm sorry to say this, Adrian began, loud enough for everyone to hear, but Ethan copied my design. Murmurs erupted in the crowd. That's a lie, Ethan said, rising to his feet. You stole my work. He reached for his sketchbook, preparing to prove it, when Adrian cut in smoothly. I have the original hand-drawn design, he announced, holding up a folder. With timestamps. He handed it over to the staff, who carried it up to the judge's table. Ethan, biting down the frustration in his chest, handed his own designs over as well. He knew they were his. He knew the truth. Natalie rested a steadying hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, she said quietly. They'll figure it out. I believe in you. The room fell into uneasy silence as the judges examined both sets of sketches. Then, finally, the host returned to the mic. After reviewing both submissions, he said, the panel has determined that Mr. Adrian's design draft predates Mr. Ethan's. A stunned hush. Then whispers. The kind that slice. It was as good as a guilty verdict. Ethan's stomach dropped. His mind reeled. No, this couldn't be happening. He pushed past rows of seats and stormed up to the judge's table, grabbing the two sketchbooks with trembling hands. His own, and Adrian's. He had to see for himself. The moment Ethan saw the sketch Adrian had submitted, a sick weight dropped into his stomach. It was his. Not a copy. Not an imitation. It was his original draft, the one he must have forgotten to take with him when he left Sterling Enterprises. All around the venue, whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into open accusations. Plagiarist. Thought he was a rising star. Unbelievable. Ethan's ears rang, his vision narrowing under the weight of the shame pressing down on him. He lifted his eyes, searching. There was only one person who could clear his name. Vivian. If Vivian stepped forward and confirmed that the sketch came from his hands, the truth would be out. Everything could still be salvaged. He looked at her. His eyes pleading. Silent. Desperate. She looked back. But said nothing. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Vivian, Ethan's voice cracked as he walked toward her, holding the sketch out like a piece of evidence soaked in betrayal. You gave this to Adrian, didn't you? Vivian flinched. Just slightly. Guilt flickered across her face, briefly, like a dying match. She parted her lips, about to speak. But Adrian's hand closed around her wrist, firm and possessive. The judges turned their eyes toward her, waiting. Everyone waited. Vivian swallowed hard, and then said, evenly. This sketch belongs to Adrian. The world fell silent around Ethan. That tiny ember of hope he had clung to went cold. His knees weakened. If not for Natalie stepping forward to catch him, he might have collapsed where he stood. Adrian, meanwhile, was reveling in it all. He watched Ethan crumble with smug satisfaction and didn't bother to hide it. When the crowd began to disperse and the tension seemed to settle, he strolled over to Ethan and Natalie, mock sympathy in his voice. So, he sneered, how's Rivers Corporation accused of plagiarism for a headline? Catchy, right? Vivian stood beside him, silent and complicit. Natalie refused to engage with Adrian, instead turning to Vivian with open disgust. Never thought I'd see Sterling Enterprises back a fraud, she said icily. Lying to protect your boyfriend? Classy. Vivian didn't even blink. Is it a crime to defend the man I love? Natalie's fists clenched. For a second, it looked like she was going to swing. But Ethan grabbed her wrist, shaking his head. He thought Natalie was hesitating for the company's sake, for their reputation. I'll resign, he said quietly. I'll take full responsibility. This won't hurt the stock price. Natalie's expression softened. I don't give a damn about the stock price. I just can't stand watching you get thrown under the bus like this. Vivian had no interest in listening to their exchange. She turned to leave with Adrian, but Ethan's voice stopped her cold. Let's just call it even, he said flatly. All the begging, all the chasing, I'll count that as my mistake. You pushed me into a lake, left me in a burning building, and now, this. He held her gaze. Consider it karma. We're done. Vivian froze. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, with a hollow voice, she gave a single word. Fine. Though Natalie believed in Ethan with unwavering conviction, so much so that she'd risk the company's stock in her own standing on his innocence, Ethan couldn't bear to let her shoulder the fallout. He submitted his resignation quietly, taking the full brunt of the plagiarism scandal upon himself. Back in the design department, Ethan packed up his things. The atmosphere was heavy. His colleagues lingered near their desks, reluctant to say goodbye. None of them believed he was guilty. He was too talented, too principled. He didn't need to steal. When Natalie returned from a grueling board meeting and saw Ethan boxing up his life's work, she rushed to his side. I'm handling it, she said firmly. I've already started explaining everything to the board. You're the victim here, Ethan. If you walk away now with this kind of accusation hanging over your head, how are you supposed to rebuild your career? Your name? Her voice cracked slightly, but she didn't waver. Ethan looked at her, deeply moved by how far she was willing to go for him. But he couldn't let her keep fighting his battles. Not like this. Natalie, thank you, he said quietly. I've saved a bit over the years. I'll be okay. I just need to rest. Step away from all this. She tried again to stop him, but he gently shook his head. Maybe after this all dies down, she said softly, you'll come back. I'll make sure there's a place for you. Ethan gave her a tired smile. The weight of the past few days had etched itself deep into his face. Maybe a break really was what he needed. Worried that he might spiral in solitude, Natalie made it her mission to keep his spirits up. Every few days, she'd drop by, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just to drag him outside for air. At first, Ethan resisted. But after days of sulking indoors, even Thomas and Helen began urging him to go. Slowly, his resolve softened. Natalie's persistence chipped away at his isolation. One afternoon, Natalie invited him out to dinner at a riverside restaurant perched high above the city. The view from the window was stunning, glimmering water below, the skyline stretched wide across the horizon. The food was good, but it was the quiet peace of the moment that began to lift something heavy from Ethan's chest. He was just about to remark on how empty the restaurant was when he noticed Natalie returning to the table. A bouquet in one hand. A small velvet box in the other. She held them out to him, smiling, bright, nervous, hopeful. Ethan blinked, caught completely off guard. I like you, Natalie said softly, eyes never leaving his. Will you be with me? She opened the box in her hand. Inside, nestled in satin, was a delicate diamond bracelet. I designed this for you. Please, don't say no. Ethan stared at the bracelet, stunned. All this time spent with Natalie had chipped away at the emotional wreckage left behind by his past. Maybe his amnesia wasn't just a loss, it was a reset. A rare, undeserved chance to move forward instead of circling old wounds. So when Natalie offered him the flowers, her voice barely concealing a tremor, Ethan took them in his hands. Okay, he said simply. The moment froze. Natalie blinked, lips parted, as if she hadn't allowed herself to imagine he'd say yes. It took Ethan's gentle teasing to bring her back to earth. Aren't you going to put the bracelet on me? He asked, with a warm smile. Startled, Natalie fumbled with the clasp, her fingers trembling as she fastened it around his wrist. Once it was secure, she leaned in and pressed a kiss to the faint scar that still marred his forearm. I swear to God, she whispered, I'll love you. Always. Later that night, back home, Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, still dazed. He stared down at the bracelet glinting on his wrist. That kiss, trembling, tender, unguarded, still burned against his skin like a promise. Even though Vivian had stood by Adrian and helped cover up the plagiarism scandal, her behavior toward him had grown colder by the day. Adrian could feel her slipping. He ground his teeth in frustration. There was no doubt in his mind, she was still thinking about Ethan. That man should have been long gone, a disgraced ghost. Yet somehow, his presence still lingered. And it drove Adrian insane. Fueled by jealousy and desperation, he grabbed his phone and typed out a message. I think I'm sick. Could you come check on me? It was a low move, but he knew her heart well. After all, she had once loved him. Maybe, deep down, she still did. When Vivian arrived at his place, she found Adrian lounging on the couch in his pajamas, looking perfectly healthy. Her expression hardened immediately. She knew exactly what this was. She turned to leave without a word, but Adrian grabbed her wrist. I'm sorry, he said quickly, voice low and raw. You've been so distant lately. I just got scared you'd leave me. That's why I lied. Something in her cooled. The irritation faded, replaced by the weary ache of old affection. Adrian pressed his advantage. Stay for dinner? Just one meal. Please. Vivian hesitated, then slowly sat down at the table. Adrian uncorked a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses, handing one to her with practiced ease. She accepted it, took a sip, then another. But after just a few swallows, something shifted. A strange heat began to crawl across her skin. Her cheeks flushed, her pulse quickened. Her body felt heavy and far too warm. Confused, she reached up and unbuttoned the top of her blouse, trying to cool herself down. But nothing about it felt right. As soon as Adrian saw Vivian loosen her buttons, he moved without hesitation, scooping her up onto his lap and reaching for the rest of her shirt. Vivian froze. The way his hands moved, the way he touched her without hesitation, it all clicked. This wasn't concern. It wasn't affection. It was a setup. Her heart pounded, not with desire, but with fury. Clenching her jaw, she shoved Adrian with all the strength she had left. He stumbled backward and hit the floor, wide-eyed in disbelief. "Vivian," he began, but she was already staggering toward the door. Adrian scrambled to his feet and grabbed her from behind, arms clinging around her waist like a drowning man. "Don't go," he begged, voice cracking. "Please. Just stay." Vivian spun around and slammed him against the wall. Her voice, when it came, was sharp and bitter with betrayal. "All these years I thought you were kind. Thought your little outbursts were just because you cared too much. But you? You drugged me. You trapped me. I never imagined you could be this kind of man." The mask dropped. Adrian's stunned expression twisted into something darker, raw and raging. His voice dropped low and venomous. "Don't pretend this is about what I did. You're still hung up on Ethan, aren't you?" Vivian's eyes narrowed. "This has nothing to do with him." But Adrian just laughed, loud and bitter. "You talk like he's a stalker. You act like you're repulsed by him. But let's be honest, you loved the way he chased you. You miss it, don't you?" Vivian stared at him, horrified at the man he had become. "You need to get a grip." And then, without another word, she turned and walked out. Back at her apartment, Vivian had barely finished cleaning herself up when the weight of everything hit her. She collapsed into bed, heart still pounding, skin still burning with the echoes of what had nearly happened. Adrian's voice echoed in her mind like a splinter. "You loved his attention. You still care." She muttered the words under her breath, again and again, like a curse she couldn't shake. Then, slowly, she reached for the drawer beside her bed and pulled out the crumpled fragment of a photograph, the one she'd found at the amusement park. Her fingers traced its jagged edge, as if memory had a texture, a weight, a temperature. And with it came the flood. Ethan's voice. Ethan's eyes. Ethan's relentless, stupid, sincere pursuit of her, day after day, year after year. Vivian squeezed the photo fragment in her hand. She hated the truth of it. Hated how deeply she had grown used to him always being there. And now, she had no idea what to do with that kind of emptiness. The next day, Vivian went looking for Ryan. "You remember that room surveillance footage you mentioned, do you still have it?" Ryan blinked, caught off guard. "What footage?" "The one from the day of the fire. When Adrian and Ethan were in the room." A bitter smile curled on Ryan's lips. "Oh, that footage. Didn't you say you trusted Adrian? You promised you'd come by that night to watch it. But one phone call from him and suddenly you didn't need it anymore, remember?" Vivian said nothing. Ryan's voice sharpened. "What, changed your mind now? Regretting it? Trying to win Ethan back?" There was no defiance in Vivian this time. Just silence. Ryan studied her face, her eyes heavy with something dangerously close to regret. He sighed. "Well, too late anyway. Ethan messaged me a few days ago. Said he has a girlfriend now. Her name's Natalie or something." Vivian's head snapped up. Her voice cracked. Girlfriend? What girlfriend? Ryan took a step back at the force of her reaction. Yeah. Natalie. They're together now. Vivian stood frozen, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and panic. No. Her mind refused to accept it. He must be doing this to get back at me, to provoke me. This can't be real, she whispered to herself, dazed. He's just trying to make me jealous. Ryan watched his sister unravel with a strange mixture of satisfaction and pity. Part of him wanted to let her stew in the consequences, but she was still his sister. With a reluctant sigh, he handed over everything he'd found, the raw footage, the logs, the call records, proof that Adrian had manipulated everything from the start. Think it through, Vivian. Maybe if you move fast enough, you still have a chance. Vivian didn't reply. She shut herself in her room and watched every second of the footage Ryan gave her. Each click, each frame, stripped away the excuses she'd clung to. All this time, Adrian had played her. All this time, Ethan had been the one burning, both literally and figuratively, for crimes he never committed. By the end, her hands were trembling. What had she done? Ryan had been right. She'd let her own blindness cause Ethan more pain than anyone deserved. There was no time to waste. Find out where Ethan is, she told her assistant. Her voice was quiet but urgent. Now. Meanwhile. Natalie already knew. She'd been tipped off earlier that day. Vivian was digging around, trying to locate Ethan. When Ethan came home, she sat beside him on the couch and told him gently, Vivian's looking for you. My assistant just confirmed it. She didn't tell him what she thought he should do. She just looked at him calmly and added, I'll respect whatever you decide. Ethan frowned. The first reaction was confusion. The second, pure disdain. Why is she suddenly trying to find me? Ethan scoffed as he closed the fridge door. Aren't she and Adrian madly in love, still in their honeymoon phase or whatever? Natalie walked over and casually looped her arms around his waist. Word is, she and Adrian had a falling out. Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. So they break up and she remembers I exist? What does she take me for, some backup boyfriend waiting on standby? He leaned against the counter, shaking his head with a bitter laugh. I must have been blind back then. 7 years, Natalie. 7 damn years I chased that woman. Natalie didn't respond right away. She knew Ethan had amnesia. He didn't remember the way he used to look at Vivian, the way her name alone could change his entire mood. But even so, now that she knew Vivian was back in the picture, she couldn't help the flicker of unease. What if he remembered? What if he went back? Ethan caught the look in her eyes and took her hand. You don't need to worry, he said softly. I see her clearly now. I'm not going back to that, no matter what she says or does. That calmed her. A little. Then let's take a trip, Natalie said, wrapping her fingers more tightly around his. Go away for a while. You said you wanted peace, let's find some. Ethan nodded. Sounds good. Let's get out of here. Later that day. Vivian stood outside Ethan's front door, heart pounding harder than she expected. She rehearsed what she wanted to say, 5 times, maybe 6, before she finally raised her hand and knocked. The door opened. But it wasn't Ethan. It was Helen. Helen recognized her instantly, and her expression darkened. Without a word, she moved to close the door. Wait, please, Vivian stepped forward, stopping the door with her hand. I just want to see Ethan. I need to talk to him. Helen's voice was cold. You still have the nerve to say his name? Vivian opened her mouth to explain, but Helen cut her off. He's doing just fine now. And we adore Natalie, by the way. She's kind, respectful, and she was there when he needed someone most. She gave Vivian one last, hard look, then slammed the door shut with a final word. "Stop bothering him." Vivian stood there for a long time, motionless. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had come all this way, only to be shut out before she even got a chance to speak. Her chest tightened as she realized she had no reason, no excuse, to knock again. What could she say that would change anything? Defeated, she turned and walked away. Back at Crestwood, Ryan was waiting in the living room when Vivian walked in. One look at her pale face, and he knew, she didn't see Ethan. "Let me guess," Ryan said, setting down his mug. "Didn't get past the front door?" Vivian shook her head. He almost told her where Ethan had gone. Almost. But then he remembered how much Ethan had suffered. How much trust had been broken. Maybe this wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe if Vivian really had to work for it, really had to fight to get him back, she'd finally learn how to cherish him. So Ryan stayed quiet. And let her sit with her regret. Ryan watched his sister pace by the window like a ghost. "You know," he said quietly, not even looking up from his book, "Ethan used to chase after you like his life depended on it. And you." He looked up now, his gaze sharp. "You didn't treasure it." "Not one bit." Vivian didn't defend herself. She couldn't. Not anymore. Ryan's voice softened. "Now he's really done with you. And for the first time, you're learning what it feels like, to be the one doing the chasing." Vivian didn't flinch under his words. Because he was right. This was her consequence. Her penance. She drifted through the next few days in silence, barely eating, barely speaking. Adrian showed up once or twice, tried to talk, tried to plead, but she slammed the door in his face every time. Eventually, Ryan came into her room and leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "He's back," he said simply. Vivian's head jerked up. "Ethan's back from the trip." That was all she needed. Vivian didn't wait for sunrise. She drove through the night, all the way to Seabrook. As her car pulled into Ethan's neighborhood, she spotted him just as he stepped out of the house. She was about to call his name when she saw Natalie walking beside him. They were holding hands. Vivian froze behind a patch of blooming oleanders, watching from the shadows like she didn't belong in daylight anymore. Natalie said something, and Ethan laughed, a deep, carefree laugh that made his whole face light up. Vivian's breath caught. She remembered that smile. She remembered when it used to belong to her. But now? Now it was someone else's. She followed them, at a distance, through the neighborhood. They laughed together. Walked close. Eventually, they entered another apartment building, together. She stood on the curb, watching, her hands balled into fists. She almost ran in after them. Almost tore up the stairs and banged on the door. But just as she stepped forward, the elevator doors opened again. Natalie emerged alone, got into her car, and drove away. Vivian exhaled. He's not serious. He's using her to get to me, she told herself. That thought, fragile and desperate as it was enough to keep her going. The next morning, Vivian woke up early. She curled her hair, put on makeup, chose a soft pink blouse that made her look gentle, apologetic. She even picked out a bouquet, white lilies with blush roses, and drove back to Ethan's building. She took a deep breath at his door, then knocked. Inside, Ethan was still groggy, hair messy, coffee only half made. He smiled as he walked to the door, calling out, "You're early today. Couldn't sleep?" He opened it. His smile disappeared. Vivian stood there, holding flowers. He didn't hesitate. He started to close the door. But she was quicker. She wedged her hand in the doorframe, shoved the bouquet forward. "Ethan, wait." He didn't take the flowers. His voice was hard now. "How do you know where I live?" Were you following me? Vivian didn't answer. I came to apologize, she said instead. I know I was wrong. Please let me explain. I don't want to hear it, Ethan said sharply, trying again to shut the door. But somehow, Vivian found the strength to resist. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was madness. But inch by inch, the door began to reopen. Just then, the elevator dinged. Natalie stepped out. She spotted Vivian at the door and immediately rushed over, yanking her away and planting herself firmly between Vivian and Ethan. What are you doing here? She demanded, shielding Ethan with her body. What do you want from him? Vivian didn't even glance at her. Her eyes stayed locked on Ethan, her voice soft but insistent. I broke up with Adrian. She took a step forward. Everything that happened, it was my fault. But I see that now. I finally know what I want. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't stop. You don't have to keep using Natalie to get a reaction out of me. I get it. You're hurt. But I'm here now. I'm ready. Ethan's expression darkened. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. I'm not using anyone, he said, voice clipped. I'm with Natalie because she's kind. And honest. And good. And because I like her. He narrowed his eyes. This has nothing to do with you. We're done, Vivian. We've been done. But she wouldn't let up. You say that, she whispered, but I remember how you used to look at me. How you followed me for 7 years like I was your whole world. That's enough, Ethan snapped, cutting her off. I don't remember any of that. Vivian froze. What do you mean? I was in a car accident. The night you left me for Adrian. I lost my memory. Everything about you, it's gone. He stared at her, tired and raw. So maybe this is what you wanted all along. You hated me trailing behind you, didn't you? Well, now you're free of it. Vivian's voice cracked. No. No, I didn't hate it. Ethan, I loved. But Natalie had had enough. She stepped forward, firm and unshaken. He said what he needed to say. If you ever come back here again, I'll call the police. She grabbed the door. Vivian flinched. And then, slam. The door shut in her face. Vivian sat on the floor outside Ethan's apartment, her back pressed to the wall, the bouquet crumpled in her lap. She sat there for what felt like hours, numb. And then, in a whisper, barely loud enough to be heard through the door, she said. If you ever remember, if those memories come back, will you come back to me, too? She didn't wait for an answer. But in her heart, she was sure, Ethan couldn't have just forgotten 7 years of love. Not really. He'd chased her for so long. That kind of devotion didn't just vanish overnight. He belonged with her. He just didn't remember it yet. Vivian returned to Crestwood that night, rummaging through every corner of her home, desperate to find anything that might help Ethan recover his memories. She tore through boxes, drawers, even the dusty corners of the storage room. And finally, tucked inside a small, forgotten box, she found it. A silver cross pendant. The one Ethan had once bought for her. She stared at it, fingers trembling. That was all that remained. No letters. No photos. Nothing else had survived. Vivian turned to the housekeeper. The things Ethan gave me, where are the rest? They used to be in the storage room. The housekeeper hesitated. Didn't Mr. Adrian ask us to throw those out a while back? Vivian's chest tightened. She waved the woman away, lips pressed tight as she turned back to the storage room, still hoping for something more. Anything more. But there was nothing. Only the pendant. The next morning, Vivian went straight to Seabrook. She waited outside Ethan's building the entire day. Hours passed, shadows stretched, and just when she was starting to lose hope, she saw them, Ethan and Natalie, coming out together. She didn't hesitate. Vivian stepped forward, blocking their path, clutching the pendant in her palm. "Ethan," she said, eyes bright with urgency. "Do you remember this cross? You gave it to me after my promotion dinner, you said it." Before she could finish, Ethan snatched the pendant from her hand and flung it to the ground. "Do you really think showing me some old trinket is going to change anything?" His voice was sharp, cutting. "I told you, I don't remember. I don't want to remember. And I don't want to see you again." Vivian's breath caught in her throat. In a panic, she reached for him, her hand catching his wrist, but Natalie stepped in between them. "Back off," Natalie warned. Vivian's frustration snapped. Without thinking, she swung and struck Natalie across the cheek. Natalie stumbled, then immediately retaliated. A sharp punch landed against Vivian's temple, and the two women broke into a full fight, fists flying, hair tangled. "Stop it!" Ethan shouted, lunging forward and pulling Natalie away by the waist. He cradled her close, shielding her from further blows. "You're bleeding," he murmured, brushing his fingers against the edge of her lip. Natalie wiped the blood with the back of her hand and spat toward the sidewalk in Vivian's direction. "If you come near him again, I swear, I'll beat the hell out of you every time I see you." Ethan took her hand gently, guiding her back toward the building. His arms stayed around her waist. Protective. Intimate. Vivian stood there, frozen. "Ethan." He didn't turn around. He didn't even pause. He walked away, one hand holding Natalie's, the other lightly cupping her bruised cheek as they disappeared into the building together. Vivian stared after them. She wanted to run. To follow. To scream. But her feet refused to move. They felt like they were weighed down with lead. All she could do was stand there, heartbreaking, watching Ethan walk away from her, again. And this time, she wasn't sure he'd ever come back. Vivian stood there in the growing dark, her feet planted to the ground, her thoughts a whirlwind of regret and loss. Back in college, she'd gotten into a heated argument with another girl over Adrian. Ethan had stepped in, shielding her with his whole body, taking the brunt of the shouting, even the slap meant for her. He had quietly tended to the scratch on her arm afterward, dabbing ointment on it with trembling hands. She hadn't even thanked him. Instead, she'd rolled her eyes, called him overbearing, and shoved him away. That soft smile Natalie had now? She'd had it once. Those gentle hands that pulled Natalie into his arms, the voice that soothed her wounds, once, they had all belonged to her. And she had thrown it away. She hadn't just lost Ethan. She had driven him straight into someone else's arms. Vivian stood still in the silence, night slowly falling around her, the lights of the building flickering on one by one. And then... Vivian. The name cut through the quiet. Her heart jumped. For one breathless second, she thought. Ethan? She turned around quickly. It was Adrian. She froze. Her face turned cold in an instant. "What the hell do you want?" Adrian looked pitiful. His eyes were wet, and he stared at her like a man desperate for forgiveness. "Vivian, I know I messed up. Everything that happened, it was my fault. Please, just give me another chance." He reached for her hand. Vivian jerked back. Adrian stumbled forward from the momentum and nearly fell to the ground. "I really mean it," he pleaded, steadying himself. "You used to love me, remember? You." "Don't you dare," Vivian snapped. Her voice shook with fury. "Don't you dare bring that up. I did everything for you, and you used me over and over again. I was nothing but a pawn to you." Adrian's wounded expression dropped. The mask of sorrow slipped, replaced by a bitter sneer. "Oh, so now you're the victim? You want to talk about shame? What about you? Out there sobbing on Ethan's doorstep, pretending you're some kind of saint. He stepped closer, eyes blazing. You think you're any better than me? Vivian's stomach twisted. You followed me, she asked through clenched teeth. Adrian let out a dry laugh. Damn right I did. How else was I supposed to witness this little soap opera? Believe me, it was worth it. The mockery in his tone lit a fuse in Vivian's chest. Without thinking, she lunged. Her hand flew to his throat, fingers tightening fast. Adrian's eyes bulged as he stumbled back, gasping, clawing at her wrist. But Vivian didn't let go. You want to talk about pain? She hissed. You think you know what you've done? Adrian's face turned crimson, his breath rattling as he tried to speak, but only a choked wheeze came out. Still, he forced out the words. I didn't break him, you did. That was what undid her. Those 7 words. She let go all at once, shoving him hard. Adrian collapsed to the sidewalk, wheezing, clutching his neck as he coughed and gasped for air. Vivian stood over him, her fists clenched at her sides. All the fury, all the helplessness, it churned in her chest, but she couldn't say a word. Because he was right. Vivian stared down at Adrian, her voice sharp as a blade. I'll make everything public, the way you used me, manipulated me. Every filthy detail. Adrian's face paled instantly. He tried to scramble up, but the shock of nearly suffocating moments ago had drained all strength from his limbs. His body gave out beneath him, and he collapsed again, only able to drag himself toward her on his elbows. No, no, Vivian, please, he begged, grabbing desperately at the hem of her pants. I didn't mean it. I was out of line. I was angry, don't do this. Please. Vivian glanced down at his trembling hand clutching her like a lifeline. Her lip curled in disgust. Let go. But he didn't. Adrian's panic only deepened. He knew the truth would ruin him. If she spoke out, if she told Ethan what really happened, he wouldn't just lose her. He'd lose everything. He clung to her leg as though her silence might save him. Vivian didn't hesitate. She kicked his hand away without mercy and turned on her heel. Adrian collapsed again, his fingers scraping at the pavement, his breath ragged as he watched her walk away. His heart thundered with something darker than shame. Why? Why did Ethan get to be the one women loved? Why did he always win? Adrian's eyes gleamed, unfocused and feral. Muttering under his breath, he said the words before he could stop himself. If Ethan were gone, maybe Vivian would come back to me. Ethan hadn't stepped outside in 2 days. Not since the fight. Not since the knock on his door. Not since Vivian. He lay low in his apartment, tension wound tight inside him like a spring. Natalie could feel it too, feel it in the way he kept checking the door, the way he moved with caution even in his own home. She knew he needed fresh air. Come on, she coaxed gently. Let's go out. Just for a bit. You need it. Ethan looked at the bruise still healing at the corner of her mouth. He pictured Vivian's wild eyes, her refusal to let go. What if she shows up again? He asked, voice low. Natalie reached up, wrapped her arms around him, and planted a kiss on his cheek. Then I'll protect you, she said with a wink. You're safe with me. Ethan sighed. Her warmth grounded him. Eventually, he gave in with a small nod. They headed to the nearby mall, hand in hand. But they didn't even make it past the entrance. Just as they were about to step inside, a familiar voice called out. Vivian. She was running toward them. Ethan instinctively turned, trying to pull Natalie away, but Vivian was already closing the gap, her hand reaching out toward him. And then. Screeching tires. A blur of metal. A car came hurtling out of nowhere, aimed directly at Ethan. Ethan froze. The sound of screeching tires roared in his ears, but his body wouldn't move. He stood paralyzed, eyes wide as the car barreled straight toward him. "Ethan, move!" Natalie and Vivian shouted in unison. Natalie was closer. She launched herself forward, grabbing Ethan with all her strength and yanking him out of the car's direct path. But it was too late. The car clipped them both. The impact sent their bodies flying sideways. They rolled hard across the pavement, tumbling like ragdolls until they finally came to a breathless halt by the edge of a flower bed. Ethan's head slammed against the brick lining. Natalie's arms curled around him protectively, her body cushioning his fall. The blow had struck her leg first, she could feel the bone scream in protest. Her arm had scraped hard against the ground, the skin torn and raw. But none of that mattered. She looked down at the man in her arms. Blood was streaming from a wound on Ethan's forehead. His eyes were shut. His chest rose shallowly, and then... nothing. "Help!" Natalie screamed, panic cracking her voice. "Somebody call an ambulance. Now!" Vivian ran up then, gasping, eyes locked on Ethan's bloodied face. She reached out, trembling. Natalie shoved her back with every ounce of strength she had left. "Don't touch him," she snapped. Her voice was ragged but full of fury. "Go deal with Adrian. Look what he just did." Vivian's head snapped toward the car that had crashed into a nearby flower bed. Smoke was billowing from under the hood. The airbags had deployed. The front end was mangled. And behind the shattered windshield, in the driver's seat, slumped over the airbag, was Adrian. Her heart dropped. Vivian ran to the vehicle, wrenched open the driver's door, and dragged Adrian out. His head lolled, smeared with blood. He was still conscious, barely. "What the hell did you do?" Vivian screamed, pushing him hard onto the concrete. Adrian groaned in pain, dazed and disoriented. "If Ethan dies, I swear I will make you pay for this." In the distance, sirens wailed louder and louder, ambulances and police racing toward the scene. Ethan came to slowly, the sterile scent of disinfectant thick in his nostrils. A white ceiling. Fluorescent lights humming above. Beeping monitors to the side. He blinked, confused. Where was he? He tried to sit up, but pain bloomed in his skull like a firecracker. A nurse appeared instantly by his side. Hey, don't move. You hit your head. Just stay still, okay?" Ethan closed his eyes again, breathing shallow, fragments of memory starting to return. The car. Natalie. Blood. Everything went black once more. Ethan clutched the nurse's wrist, his voice trembling with urgency. "Natalie, where is she? Is she okay?" The nurse tried to calm him. "She's in the room next door. She came in with you." Ethan's grip tightened. "Is she hurt? How bad is it?" His voice cracked. The fear was visible in his eyes, shimmering like tears about to fall. "She's stable," the nurse reassured him. "Just a fractured leg and a few scrapes, nothing life-threatening." But the words barely made a dent. Ethan was already trying to sit up, wincing against the pain, determined to see Natalie for himself. "Please, you need to rest. I need to see her." As the nurse tried to restrain him, the door opened. Natalie appeared, being wheeled in by another nurse. Her leg was in a soft brace, her arm bandaged, but she was awake and alert. Ethan froze for a moment, then broke down. He wrapped his arms around her the moment she was within reach, pulling her close, tears sliding down his face. "You're okay, thank God you're okay." Natalie gently stroked his hair, holding him close. "The doctor said you've got a concussion. You need to rest, and you can't get too worked up." Reluctantly, Ethan let her guide him back to the bed. Natalie parked her wheelchair beside him, refusing to leave his side. Then, The door burst open again. Vivian walked in, carrying a bag of supplements and looking visibly distressed. Ethan and Natalie both frowned the moment they saw her. "You need to leave now," Ethan snapped, pointing toward the door. Vivian set the bag down, ignoring his anger. "I didn't know what Adrian was planning. I swear." Before she could finish, Ethan grabbed the bag and hurled it at her. Bottles clattered across her chest and hit the floor. Vivian didn't move. She let it all hit her. "If this is what it takes to earn your forgiveness," she whispered, "then do it. Throw whatever you want." Ethan let out a bitter laugh, voice cold and razor-sharp. "You think a few pity performances and some empty apologies are enough to wipe away 7 years of heartbreak?" Vivian flinched at the words, 7 years. Her eyes lit with a desperate hope. "Ethan, does that mean you got your memory back?" Natalie's heart clenched. She turned toward Ethan, silent, worried. How could her few months with him possibly compete with 7 years of history? Ethan saw the fear flicker in her eyes. He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently before shifting his gaze back to Vivian. "Yes. I remember everything now." Vivian took a step closer, but Ethan didn't soften. "But why do you think that changes anything? For 7 years, did you give me even a shred of kindness? Do you have anything, that proves you cherished our time together? Because the only thing you could even find to remind me of us, was a necklace I bought for you. You never held on to me. You never saw me. You just liked having me around." Vivian stood there, words caught in her throat, her expression unraveling. The pain she had spent so long denying finally stared back at her, and this time, it had Ethan's voice. Ethan's voice softened, but there was no hesitation in his words. 7 years, Vivian. You got tired. And I got worn out. He looked down for a second, then met her eyes one last time. "I've found someone I want to spend the rest of my life with. Please, let me go." It was both a rejection and a plea. "I'm sorry," Vivian whispered. And with that, she turned and walked out of the room. No, she fled. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway like a retreat. Inside, Natalie sat quietly, her heart racing. Then, in a voice laced with nervous hope, she asked the question that had been sitting in her chest. "Ethan, when you said you found someone to spend your life with, did you mean me?" Ethan reached for her hand and held it tighter. His eyes locked with hers. "Yes. I meant you." Just outside the hospital room, Vivian hadn't even caught her breath before Adrian appeared. He looked pale, sunken, nothing like the arrogant man he used to be. He grabbed at her sleeve like a man drowning, clinging to the last piece of driftwood. "Vivian," he begged, "I can't go to prison. I can't." She said nothing. Vivian had already released the evidence, the plagiarism, the manipulation, the corporate sabotage. The false allegations that once haunted Ethan and nearly destroyed Rivers Corporation were now fully and publicly traced back to Adrian, and by extension, Sterling Enterprises. Adrian had been fired. Publicly condemned online. And after deliberately ramming a car into Ethan and Natalie, the police had opened a criminal investigation. Now, he was facing a long prison sentence. Desperate, Adrian knelt at her feet, voice quaking. "Please, Vivian. I didn't mean to kill him. I swear, I wasn't trying to kill anyone, it was a moment of rage, I wasn't thinking." Vivian calmly peeled his fingers off her sleeve, one by one. "Save it for the police." And then she shoved him back. Adrian crumpled to the ground. That was it. The last thread of hope snapped. He collapsed into a heap and sobbed, uncontrollably, shamelessly. Ethan only learned of Adrian's final downfall through Natalie, a few days later. "Vivian stopped by to see you," she said quietly over breakfast. Ethan blinked. Vivian? It had been calm lately. Peaceful. Vivian hadn't resurfaced since that day in the hospital. He had started to believe, maybe she was finally letting go. Natalie stirred her coffee. Her tone wasn't jealous, just reflective. Ever since Ethan had regained his memory and confessed his feelings, she had stopped seeing Vivian as a threat. The competition was long over. She came looking for you, Natalie said, her voice calm but pointed. Said she's dug through everything, Adrian's been arrested, locked up. She paused for a second before continuing, as if deciding whether the next part was even worth saying. She also said, she trampled on your love for 7 years. So now it's her turn to chase after you. Ethan looked at her blankly, then made a dramatic gagging motion. Natalie burst into laughter, and Ethan joined her. They were laughing so hard it brought tears to Natalie's eyes. When she finally caught her breath, she turned to him. Ethan, are you really over her? Without missing a beat, Ethan kissed her square on the cheek. I've answered that 100 times already, he said with a grin. But fine. Once more, for the record. I love only one person, now and forever, and that person is Natalie. Natalie beamed. Then suddenly, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small ring box. I know it's not exactly traditional. Girls don't usually propose. And yeah, maybe it's impulsive. But I can't wait anymore. She opened the box. Ethan, will you marry me? There were no flash mobs, no fireworks, no crowd. Just the two of them, quiet and honest. Ethan stared at her, heart pounding so loudly he could hardly hear anything else. One thought, loud and clear, overrode everything in his head. Say yes. And he did. I will. After returning from Seabrook, Vivian spiraled. She locked herself inside her apartment, drinking until the hours bled together, day into night and back again. When Ryan opened the door, the stench of stale alcohol was so strong it made him recoil a full step. He had to steel himself before entering, pinching his nose as he walked in. Vivian was slumped on the floor, propped against the sofa, a nearly empty bottle dangling from her fingers. When she heard someone enter, her eyes lit up with a flicker of hope. But the moment she saw it was Ryan, that flicker died just as fast. Stop drinking, Ryan muttered, snatching the bottle from her hand. Vivian didn't argue. She just reached for another and took a long swig. What are you doing here? Ryan kicked her lightly in the leg. Didn't want you drinking yourself to death. His words were blunt, but there was a weight behind them. Concern. Exhaustion. Familiarity. Still, he left and returned with a tray of greasy diner-style breakfast, scrambled eggs, hash browns, thick-cut bacon. Vivian didn't move to take it. Ryan set it down on the table. Got the recipe from Ethan. At the mention of Ethan's name, something shifted behind Vivian's eyes. She looked at the plate, then reached out. The smell alone triggered something deep and raw. A taste she hadn't felt in years. A memory she couldn't push away. She took the first bite, and the tears came. Quiet, bitter, relentless. She didn't stop eating until the plate was clean, her tears mixing with the salt of the food and the ache of regret. Can you talk to Ethan for me? Vivian's voice cracked as she finally broke down. Please. I know I was wrong. I know it now. She choked on her words, the tears coming freely. Her pride had been stripped down to nothing. Ryan had once promised Ethan that he'd stay out of anything involving Vivian. He opened his mouth, ready to say no. But looking at her now, skin pale, hair matted, shoulders slumped under the weight of everything she'd destroyed, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He sighed. I'll try to get a sense of where Ethan stands. Back at home, Ryan had barely pulled out his phone to call Ethan when the screen lit up. Ethan was calling him. Ethan, Ryan answered, surprised, what's up? I'm getting married, Ethan said, his voice calm but full. I want you to be my best man. It hit Ryan like a jolt. Years ago, when Ethan was head over heels for Vivian, he'd said the same thing, that Ryan would stand beside him on the day he married her. Now, the bride had changed, but the promise hadn't. For a long beat, Ryan said nothing. The words were there, just stuck. "Ryan? You still there?" Ethan's voice broke through the silence. Yeah. Of course. If you're getting married, I'd be honored to be your best man." Ryan swallowed the rest. Whatever he'd planned to say about Vivian, he let it go. Ethan sounded genuinely happy. That was enough. Still, Ethan caught the hesitation in his voice. "Something on your mind?" he asked. Ryan hesitated again. Then, "Nah. Just surprised, that's all." "When's the big day?" As he hung up, Ryan made a quiet decision. Ethan had finally found someone who treated him right. After all the pain he'd endured, he deserved joy, not ghosts from the past. And as for Vivian, maybe this was the price she had to pay. When Ryan returned to Vivian's apartment, she rushed to the door the moment she heard the lock click. "Well?" she asked, breathless. "What did he say?" "He's getting married," Ryan said simply. It was like watching the air collapse out of her lungs. Vivian stood frozen, shoulders buckling, like someone had pulled the spine right out of her. "He's moved on," Ryan added gently. "You need to, too." Vivian didn't answer. Her silence was louder than any protest. The day before Ryan was set to leave for Seabrook, Vivian found him again. She didn't say much. Just handed him a small velvet box, jewelry, by the feel of it. "Give this to him for me," she said. "She's the one who made it." "A comb." "Hand-carved," Vivian said, pushing the small velvet box into Ryan's hand. "Give it to him as a wedding gift." Ryan took it, nodding. "I'll make sure he gets it." But Vivian stopped him. "Don't tell him it's from me." She paused for a beat, then added with a bitter smile, "If he knows it's from me, he won't accept it." Ryan didn't press. He just nodded, then tucked the box away. Moments before the ceremony began, Ryan pulled Ethan aside. He handed him the velvet box. "A little something for the groom," Ryan said. "Wishing you a lifetime of happiness." Ethan opened the box. Inside was a handcrafted sandalwood comb. He stared at it for a long time. Then slowly, he closed the box and handed it back. "It's from Vivian, isn't it?" Ryan was caught off guard. "How did you?" Ethan let out a soft laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Back then, everyone was into making handmade gifts for the person they liked. "I made her a ceramic mug. Took me days. Just wanted her to keep it." He looked at the box again. "All I ever wanted was for her to buy me a comb. Didn't even have to make it." He shook his head. "And now it finally shows up, just in time for my wedding." A moment passed, heavy with irony. "I can't take it," Ethan said gently. "Not today. Please, give it back to her." Ryan sighed and slipped the box back into his coat pocket. The ceremony began. Everything moved in rhythm, soft music, gentle light, friends and family watching with teary smiles. "Now, please exchange your rings." Natalie slipped the ring onto Ethan's finger, her hand steady. As he leaned in to kiss her, Natalie's eyes flicked past the guests, to the very edge of the reception hall. There, half hidden in shadow, stood Vivian. Their eyes met for a single moment. Natalie gave the smallest, polite nod in her direction, acknowledgement, not invitation. Vivian's lips curled into a tight, pained smile. She turned, and quietly slipped out of the hall. Some mistakes cost more than time. Some shut doors for good. She had once believed she'd be the one standing beside him on this day. Now, all she could do was walk away. "Nat," Ethan whispered, catching her eyes. Did you just nod at someone? Natalie smiled, brushing his cheek. No one important. And with that, Ethan turned his focus back to the woman in front of him, the one who had stayed. The one who had loved him at his lowest. Their fingers laced together. Their lips met under the warm lights. And in that moment, Ethan kissed the life he had chosen. The life that had chosen him back.